Welcome to another exciting episode of the Collect and Destroy podcast. I am your host, the Baxter of Puppets. There's one man synonymous with roundhouse spin kicks, high-waisted pants, and falling into the splits at the drop of a dime. I'm not talking about my guest today, but I am talking about the star of today's double feature episode, the great and powerful martial arts legend and renowned action star, Jean-Claude Van Damme. My guest today is one of my longtime friends and frequent podcast collaborators. With his web-footed companions, he's quickly turning into Roseville's own Tony Soprano. He's Hoffman, Hoff Machine. Ken Hoffman, welcome to the show.
What's up, sir? It is good to be back, my friend. Good to see you.
It's good to have you. What's new? What's going on with ducks? What?
Yeah, I guess you follow me on the socials. Because I don't think we talked about it the last time we were on air together. But yeah, I've got a pool and a pair of ducks landed in them. And very much like Tony Soprano, I was like so psyched. I've been living in this house for 4 years and have been waiting for ducks to come and visit me. And they finally did. Well, it turns out they were looking to find a spot to nest. And they did. And I came out one day and the mama had built a little bungalow next to the sago palm on the side of my pool. And my neighbors across the street who have had ducks for like 7 years in a row in their pool and have talked about it, gave me, sort of the rundown of what to expect. She said the mother's going to lay an egg every day until she's done. And then she's going to sit on them for 28 days to incubate them. Well, the mother laid 11 eggs. And we were all very excited. My son, who's 5, my mother and sister were still living here at the time, although they just moved out 2 weeks ago. Hooray. They were all excited. We're all animal lovers. We're going to have a little duckling swimming in the pool. Well, 2 weeks into that 28-day incubation period, must have been a raccoon that got into the backyard. And dude, it was a murder scene. It was awful, like legitimate murder scene, like piles of blood and feathers and broken eggs. The eggs were in the pool. They're all over the deck. 7 of the eggs were destroyed. 4 of them survived. I found the mother's head down in the mulched area down below. I found the body a week later in the waterfalls, covered in maggots. Dude, it was like total CSI. It was horrible.
This is what we call life lessons, right? Teaching moments.
So I didn't tell Jacob that I found like all of these parts. He had named the ducks. He named them David and Nuju. I don't know where those names came from, but they were like perfect names. So, anyways, we had four eggs that survived, and we incubated them, and one of them actually hatched. So I got a wild mallard a couple weeks ago, and everything I'd read on the internet suggested that I had needed to buddy them up because they're pretty social creatures. So we went to the Tractor Supply Company, and we got another duck we bought there. We put them together, and now I've got 2 ducks quacking around the house. So it's been fun. It's been pretty hilarious, quite honestly. It's called imprinting with humans. They bond with humans. They think they're human. They follow me around the house, but they're a mess, man. They poop like I don't know, 100 times a day, no exaggeration. So in fact, we've decided that we really can't keep them. I don't have a backyard that has grass in it. I have like the pool and it's all concrete around it, and then like landscaping stone. So that's not conducive to a duck environment. So after some, research for quite a while, I found a woman in Sacramento who has a little bit of a farm, and she's got 48 ducks as pets, and she's going to take on Petey and Butters, which are my ducks, and give them a better life than I can. But I feel good and vindicated that we were able to save them 1 egg and give them a buddy from the store. And now we got these 2 little cute ducks for a couple weeks.
Yeah, that's really cool. And like Jacob's going to always remember that, like that'll be a memory for sure. Like raising ducks.
And we've got some cute videos and cute photos, and I very much would have liked to have been like a TikTok sensation, but it's a lot of work, man. Like just keeping the cage clean. I was like, I can't film these things and do that whatever. I'm like, we got enough on our plate. I'm not gonna make social media feeds about the ducks, but it was really cute. And there, it is a cycle of life there. So there's some learning lessons for my son, but it was just it was a neat experience to go through. So
Yeah, that's super cool.
yeah.
What else you been up to? You've been I always like to add, what do you ask what have you been reading, watching, stuff like that?
Yeah, there's let's see. I'm actually I read, I don't know if you read all the Dan Brown books, Robert Langdon series, Da Vinci Code, and
Very familiar, have
Lost
not read.
Symbol, Inferno. I'm actually on the last one. I reread them all. I don't know what got me into picking them up again, but they're quick reads and they're really good. Now I'm like all into the Illuminati and like, the Freemasonry again, all that kind of like weird mystery, cool shit. It's really interesting to me. Those books are really, really well written, deservedly so to be, bestsellers. And I actually watched the Tom Hanks movie, the version of Da Vinci Code, and I'm like, oh God, it doesn't really translate. Those books are too complex, I think. But
yeah, I've seen the movies and they didn't really sweep me away.
Yeah. The books are, that's a case. I'm always sort of a book snob. We're like, oh, the book's really better. But in that circumstance, you really can compare and contrast because there's so much detail. And he always throws like, the twist at the end. Dan Brown's really good at that. So I just reread them because I wanted some quick sort of like, things to read and fall asleep to at night. And I'm basically almost done with those series at this point.
Very awesome.
Yeah.
I just started the Tony Iommi Iron Man, his biography.
Yep.
It's pretty easy read so far. I figured of all of the Sabbath books to read, this would probably give me the most of the career through all phases and maybe less involved with all, like, Ozzy has had so much happen between the solo career and stuff like that, and huge Dio fan, so I can't wait to get into that. But
I've got to get that in my queue. I haven't read Iommi's autobiography, but I have read I Am Ozzy. In fact, I when he did a book signing tour in San Francisco, I don't know, 10 years ago, and I went to the bookstore down on the wharf and got his autograph. I got a picture of him with my Sabbath shirt on. So good memory. But yeah, I'll pick up that Iommi book, man. We might end up talking about it one day.
I'm hoping to catch Ozzy one more time out on tour. I don't know what the likelihood is. I went already once on the final tour, but I would love to go again. It was such a killer show. And with Zach Wilde too, like Zach alone is like, and he'll really be the legacy moving forward with Zach Sabbath and everything.
I love Zach Sabbath. I think he does a good job. Did you ever see the videos where he plays like Sabbath songs on like the Hello Kitty instruments? I think there's a guitar version of him. I've seen like Portnoy play on Hello Kitty instruments as well. Yeah. Like I don't know why that amuses me, but I think that's pretty funny.
I'm always impressed with those kind of musicians, how they can make anything sound good.
Right.
It really proves that like it's more about the musician than the equipment.
Right. For sure.
I know we both have been watching some of the new HBO Max releases.
Yeah.
We're still in a pandemic right now.
Yeah.
2021. I think there's some light at the end of the tunnel here. Get my second shot tomorrow.
Oh, I got mine 2 weeks ago.
Good. But so this year's been kind of weird because a lot of movies that would have went to the theater are going direct to streaming on HBO Max. And the first one that I think I really enjoyed was the Godzilla versus Kong film. Your thoughts on that one?
I thought it was, great popcorn film. I don't think it was the greatest of all creature films, but certainly entertaining. I mean, the CGI was pretty good. Kong is huge. It was the better of like the new movies that they had made building up to it, like Kong Island and I forget the other Godzilla one that came before, King of the Monsters. Yep. This was the best one out of those. But what was cool about this was I got to watch it with Jacob, and he's 5, so people will argue maybe that's inappropriate to watch, but we're all for that in my house. And he's like now on a Godzilla kick. He just wants Godzilla everything. He wants so for his birthday in September, I'm going to get him like a big Godzilla versus Kong poster so he can hang it on the
Yeah,
wall. And my mother got him like a Godzilla toy, and I'm a King Kong guy, so like we kind of like we play, we battle each other. I'm Kong and he's Godzilla. It's really fun to have that. I've been waiting for 5 years for this moment, is to like watch these kinds of movies with my son. So that was the best part when I was like, dude, we're going to watch this movie. And then, but I told him it's not coming out until on Sunday because the HBO release, didn't release it, whatever, it was Friday or Saturday, whatever day it was releasing. I told him in advance, but he would ask me like every day, can we watch it tonight? I'm like, dude, I told you it's not until, Sunday. And to get him to build that anticipation and excitement and then watch it together, it's like so cool. It's so cool to like to live vicariously through him now.
It's a good time for Godzilla and Kong too. There's so many good toys right now.
Yeah.
I've been picking up. I've got a bunch of like older Kong and Godzilla stuff, but NECA's got some cool Kong figures that just came out. Playmates has got the license for Godzilla right now, and they're doing some like really affordable, like $12 Godzilla toys that are all eras of the franchise. So it'll be like the 60s one or the 50s one.
Right.
So I've been picking up some of that stuff. I enjoyed this movie from the perspective of prior to this movie, I was like, okay, I'm going to see all of the classic Toho Godzilla movies before this movie comes out. I didn't quite make it to the finish line on that because, as you know, I'm like constantly trying to watch these huge series. But my biggest takeaway of this movie was, of all the new movies, this was the closest to like the 50s and 60s movies. So part of me was like, this one jumps the shark a little bit, like Hollow Earth and all that stuff.
Right.
But when you look at those old movies, it's right in line with the stuff that they were doing back then. And they even, some of the stuff was almost like shot for shot remakes of the fight sequences. And it might not be rubber suits, but they're definitely emulating that style of battle and did a good job of like changing the scenery every time that they fought.
After this one came out, we went back and watched the original one. I'd actually never seen the original one before, and I found like a bootlegged version of it on YouTube, and we watched it on that, and Jacob watched it on it, and he was like, he's like, it's the Godzilla in the suit. And I said, yeah, but I thought that movie was actually pretty good. I thought I thought the fight scenes were better than I expected them to be. I actually, I like that kind of old stuff when you consider the movie making itself and what they were working with and how they film it. And, there's movies are almost too perfect now because of CGI. So, to go back and watch a film like that, where it's exactly like this one and you can see the before and after, or in this case, the after and then the before, it just kind of, it's an eye opener, and I appreciated it even maybe a little bit more sometimes because of it. So,
I think the other takeaway, I was talking to a guy that I work with, and he was saying his kids loved it, and he didn't really like the movie that much, but his kids loved it. And I said, hate to break it to you, but this movie was made for your kids. Like us as adults, we have to put ourselves back in the 5-year-old's feet to look up in the movie and see these creatures and believe that they are real. Talking about movies that probably aren't made for 5-year-olds. Another one that came out on HBO Max was the new Mortal Kombat film. I absolutely love this movie. What did you think?
I thought it was good. I thought it was the best of the video game interpretations that they came out. Certainly better than the original Mortal Kombat, although the original Mortal Kombat soundtrack is killer. But I also tried to watch this with Jacob, and he got a little gored out, and he was like, I can't watch this out of here. So I was like, all right. I didn't know, but he's weird because he'll watch The Walking Dead with me and not get freaked out by zombies. But kind of like fight scenes that go gory, he gets a little squirrely on still as a 5-year-old. So I was like, you need to toughen up, son. But again, it's good popcorn film. Sit there and watch on a Friday night, and I got really no complaints. And it's set up the series, so you can keep rolling with this. The casting was good, you can keep going.
I like that the actors were kind of like no-name actors. It felt very true to the source material. So like very true to the game. Like I'm putting myself back to the first time I played the arcade version of Mortal Kombat.
Right.
And like if looking to my adult self could tell them that there was going to be a movie that was actually, because back in the 90s when the original one came out, I loved it, but I only loved it because it was seeing this thing I love in the flesh.
Right.
This was an opportunity to redo that and do it much more true. I thought, I'm not a big CGI guy. I love practical effects, but I gotta hand it to this film. Outside of the Goro character, I thought the CGI was like really realistic, and the violence. It's what you want: a bloody, violent film where the characters look like the video game.
Yeah. I mean, in this circumstance, the movie did a good job of really interpreting the video game, where the video game actually had live actors. They mimicked the fighting from real martial artists. So when you get real martial artists to play characters, and then you add your CGI on top of that, rather than trying to get an actress or an actor to, learn how to fight, like for me, the biggest example of that was like Uma Thurman in Kill Bill. I'm like, clearly not a martial artist, never should have been cast, but Tarantino loved her, so he casted her in there. But when you get real martial artists to put in a martial arts film, and then you add your tricks to it, it's great. And this translated really well.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about that later. That just makes me think about the big trick is getting a martial artist who can act. Because it's either they're a great actor or they're a great martial artist.
Right.
You don't always find
rarely both. Right.
I know for a fact we'll be diving into that later.
I'm sure. Mm-hmm.
Let's
kick this off, right? Yeah.
Let's get going. So I'm going to start out with a brief synopsis of our first film, which is Bloodsport. Bloodsport is a 1988 American martial arts action film directed by Newt Arnold. The film is partly based on unverified claims by the real-life martial artist Frank Dukes. In the film, U.S. soldier Frank Dukes, played by Jean-Claude Van Damme, has come to Hong Kong to be accepted into the Kumite, a highly secret and extremely violent martial arts competition. While trying to gain access into the underground world of clandestine fighters, he also has to avoid military officers who consider him to be AWOL. After enduring a difficult training and beginning a romance with journalist Janice Kent, played by Leah Ayres, Frank is given the opportunity to fight. But can he survive?
Can he?
So, Ken, with that being said, what are your earliest memories of seeing this film?
JCVD, man. When did this movie come out? Like the late 80s, right? So 88, I think. So
yep.
I graduated high school in 93. We were in college. So like in the early, like the 92, 90, 94, 95-ish, I had some roommates when I was living off campus with a couple guys, and we were like huge movie nerds. And, you do what you do in college, you sit around, you take some bong hits, you watch the movies. And like one of them was, you pull like the VHS tape off the wall. And that's how we got into Jackie Chan that way. But Van Damme was certainly in that catalog, and Bloodsport and Kickboxer were in there. I remember just me and my roommates, shout out to Bales and Kyle and Source and all you old cronies, if you're listening. We would just have sort of like, fight night really, and watch whatever action movie it was. And I think we touched all of them. We touched, like I said, Jackie Chan, Rumble in the Bronx was a big one. Kickboxer and Bloodsport were definitely in there, and like all the other greats. And, that's always sort of what we gravitated to, these ones, because they're fun movies to watch and they're guy movies. And when you got 5 dudes in college sitting around drinking beers, these are the best movies to put on.
Yeah, and I think once you get down the rabbit hole, like for a while, I got really into kung fu movies, like old ones, but then also I got into like all like the Wire modern ones and stuff. And, I don't really remember a first time seeing the movie, but really, this was the first like mixed martial arts film. Like you have all these people from different countries
Mm-hmm.
with all different fighting styles, and they make it like very stereotypical of all the different fighting styles between karate and Muay Thai and all sorts of different things.
Right. It was very different than, the historic kung fu movies, which were coming out of Hong Kong. All the Bruce Lee things, like Kung Fu Theater and all the 70s sort of fighting
Yep.
movies. Those are very different in a very specific genre. This was not that. But the 80s did launch sort of this the US cinema's fascination with martial art movies. Karate Kid came out in 84. Maybe that was like the first one to kind of set it off. But there seems to be this theme. It's like American gets trained by, this mystical Asian guy, goes on to like fight in a big tournament or something, revenge somebody. There's all these like these underlying consistent themes in these movies.
Yeah.
But you're right, like Bloodsport was the first one where it was like showing you all these different styles and bringing them all together, and way more violent than like the Karate Kid sort of kitsch was.
Yeah, and I mean technically Bruce Lee was a mixed martial artist. Like he brought a lot of different fight styles into his films. He just never told anybody that they were different. He would just learn something, put it in the movie, and everybody was like, it's kung fu, it's that 70s martial arts style. This one was just very apparent that they were dividing it up into different styles. Who would have thought then, generations later, you've got the UFC and this is actually a thing. Mm-hmm. And to this day, countries specialize in different styles, and they're representing their country, just like these fighters in this movie. And obviously it's more like the NFL now and it's not so underground, but I mean, the other thing is typical of the 80s, the score to this movie really stands out to me. The theme songs and such, like every 80s movie had that. And,
right.
We'll talk a bit about montages, and
it's got the 80s cheese in there for sure, but it's pretty good. I'm not a huge UFC guy. I don't watch it very often, but a lot of my friends do. Do you think that there's a lot of similarities between those UFC fights and like what was portrayed in Bloodsport? Like, are there overlaps in there that seem legit?
Yeah. So what I will tell you is the same things that attract me to the real mixed martial arts attracts me to this movie. So what attracts me is different styles. So they say styles make fights. So you have a ground fighter fighting somebody that's more like a stand-up kickboxer. It's going to make for an interesting thing. They're going to try to nullify their strengths. You get two wrestlers, they're going to just end up boxing the whole time because they're both good at wrestling. But the even bigger thing in UFC is I want there to be the bad guy.
Right.
I want the guy that I want to lose just the same way as I want the good guy that is the guy that I'm always going to root for. Like Georges St-Pierre, he's from Montreal, one of the all-time greats. He's like the good guy. Like he's the guy that you're always going to be pulling for and you're going to love. But when he was undefeated, people would root for him to lose just because he was invincible.
Right.
And the same way that people root for, the Diaz brothers, they come from Sacramento and, your neck of the woods. And they're like the bad boys. But there's people who want to see them lose because they're the bad boys. And then there's also people that are like, yeah, those are my boys.
But how do the bad boys, like, because it's not like wrestling where it's like a scripted, like, I'm going to make you a bad guy versus a good guy. So is it just because their personality comes through and it's their attitude? Like it's or
personality,
or is there...
the way that, respect's a big thing, right? Like, and just so the way that they treat, there's a lot of, here's how you find out this stuff. There's a lot of press conferences. So they're asking the fighters questions, how they answer those questions. And then there's some people that create more of like a WWE persona to sell tickets. So they're saying all this stuff, but you're like, you're not really bad. You're just trying to like have the Ric Flair Macho Man talk track.
So there's a marketing ploy going on in some circumstances.
Yeah. But sometimes the people are living it. You can tell that they really are like, I don't want to hang out with that guy.
Right. Just like when baseball players, there's a lot of jerks. There's a lot of jerks in the NFL too. And you don't like them, just because they're like, oh, that guy's Guy's an ass.
Sometimes the jerk happens to be on your team, and then you're like, "Oh, I like this guy." Like,
Totally.
and you're
Totally.
like, "That doesn't really make sense." But
That happens in
so it's just
hockey a
interesting, you
lot.
know. Long before I found mixed martial arts, I found movies like this, and I got into it. And then you see it in the real life, and it's just the same kind of storytelling. The only difference is it's real life storytelling. So
Yeah.
you got this guy who's just won 7 fights in a row, and he did this and this happened, and he said this and this happened. Like, it creates its own drama,
Yeah.
just like any sports.
Got it.
And then I would say the last thing about this movie is just the casting. The characters are very diverse, so they really stand apart. And that's kind of what we'll jump into right now, is just talking about the cast itself of the movie.
Well, you mentioned earlier, JCVD plays Frank Dukes, the muscles from Brussels. I don't know if Frank Dukes is as handsome as Jean-Claude Van Damme is in real life, but he plays him anyways, and he's supposed to be this active U.S. Army captain who kind of bounces and, you know, was supposed to get permission to fight in the Kumite, but he didn't. So they send, you know, the criminal investigator command officers to go after him, which was sort of a dumb plot line, I thought. But his character, Dukes, was apparently trained in the ways of ninjutsu under a sensei, Senzo Tanaka. And apparently he was a boy, you know, well, in this story anyways, you know, he was a boy with his friends, and they were trying to break into the sensei's house to steal a katana, which is, you know, big like samurai sword. But Dukes was apprehended while returning the katana, and then subsequently gets, you know, approved to be trained by the sensei in the ways, you know, of the mystic martial arts. So, yeah, I mean, this movie sort of it's not his first movie. I think he did another one before where he played like a Russian villain, but this is really his first movie, and that set his career off.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that when he gets caught by Senso Tanaka, that the boy Frank is wearing a New York Giants jersey and a San Francisco Giants hat.
Yeah, I caught that. That's got to just be like bad prop. You know, the wardrobe manager didn't understand that those were different teams. And
they're like, let's give them American clothes.
The colors weren't a giveaway. You know, like, oh, red and blue, these don't match. Doesn't matter. The word does.
It kind of sounds like maybe your attire now that you moved from the East Coast to the West.
Nope, dude, I'm loyal. DirecTV is my most expensive bill, dude. I got the football package, the baseball package, and the hockey package.
I got the football package.
Yankees are on in a half an hour, so we got to wrap this up, man.
I got the football package. I'm good with that. So speaking of Senso Tanaka, played by Roy Chow, you know, that character was very much impressed with Dukes' integrity and toughness. So he, like you said, he decided to train him along his son in ninjutsu. What I like about this actor is something unrelated to this movie, but he's a Hong Kong-based actor. He played Lao Che in 1984's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Oh, okay.
So, and that's, you know, the beginning scene of that movie. He gets on the plane, and it has Lao Che right on the plane that he gets on. He thinks he's getting away, but so if he looks familiar, he's been in a lot of other movies.
Well, this dude should look familiar to you if you're a fan of 80s movie. Donald Gibb plays Ray Jackson, but my favorite character of his is Ogre in The Nerds, which I forgot that he was in this movie. And then I was like, oh, dude, Ogre's in this movie. I forgot, man. But Ray Jackson's his character, and he's awesome. He's like a guy that I want to hang out with. Like, you know, he wears Harley shirts and bandanas and chugs beers and, like, you know, harasses girls on the subway, but like has a heart of gold, and he's your boy, you know. He's a perfect sidekick for JC Van Damme. And there's like this total like bro scene later on when he gets beat up by Chung Lee, and and Van Damme visits him in the hospital, and he's like, I love you, you know, and he goes, ditto, you know. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So great sidekick.
When he shows up too, you almost feel like he's going to be like a bad guy.
Right. And initially, that's what I thought too. I'm like, he's a bad guy, but you know, they play video games together, and it all kind of like evens out, you know?
So Kensu He plays Victor Lin. He was assigned by the IFAA, the International Fighting Arts Association, to help the North American fighters, navigate Hong Kong, prepare for the Kumite. This actor, like, just starting with his appearance is awesome. Like, you're instantly like, this guy's awesome. Then he starts talking and he gets even awesomer. But again, talking about a diverse cast, just like a memorable, fun character.
Yeah. And then Leia Ayres plays Janice Kent. She's like the love interest reporter. She's got like that vintage, like 80s blonde look, which you need that in this movie. So other than that, I think she was really kind of just a TV actress after that. I don't think she was really a big star.
Sure.
But,
yeah.
She played her role well in this movie.
You had mentioned these two characters were probably unneeded in the film. We've got Norman Burton as CID Agent Helmer and Forrest Whitaker as CID Agent Rawlins. They're two American detectives trying to track Frank down for deserting the army to participate in the tournament. Burton's character is old and clever and nuanced, and Whitaker's character is young and aggressive and interest only in coercion by force. Obviously, Whitaker goes on to do all sorts of great things. So that's probably the most significance of these characters, is that, like, this is one of his early roles. I would say, if anything, this role is just a change of pace role for the movie so that you have another scene to cut away from. Because if you didn't have these guys, it would be a much shorter movie. I think it helps keep the plot moving along without being like, okay, we're just in these two places the entire time.
But I mean, maybe we'll talk about it later, but some of the scenes that they're in are like the worst scenes of the movie. They're like, when they're like chasing them in like the hallway. Like, these guys work these are military officers, because they're the, like, he blocks like stun guns with like a garbage can lid and it like shoots back in them. It was that scene was so bad. I was like, these two are the worst officers ever. But, Bolo Young makes up for it as Chong Li, though. That's for sure. Like, he plays the Asian big bad, he's the current Kumite champ. He always plays the villain in every movie he's been in. He was in Enter the Dragon in '72. He fought Bruce Lee in that. So very recognizable. And very rare where you see, like, martial artists this jacked. Asian martial artists this jacked. I don't think I've ever seen one. So distinct. Like, what a great character when you see him. Just a massive man, and he's got some pretty, for like the 4 lines that he says in this movie, he's got some great, just one-liners, but perfect casting. I love this guy, and he's legit. He's one of the guys, like, you cast a legit martial artist for this role, and it makes that villain way more authentic. And he nailed it, dude. I love his role in this movie.
A lot of times when we do these podcasts, we like to dive into our favorite moments of the film. So let's hold that thought that you were just talking about and continue it. Starting out with Chong Li. I mean, he creates a lot of awesome moments in this movie.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it was scripted or not, but he felt like the realist. He felt like the realist out of all of the characters, all the martial arts in the Kumite, particularly because before each fight, he snot rockets on the floor, dude. I'm like, have you ever seen that in any movie ever before? But I'm like, oh my God, that's so real. Like, I can't cut the grass without snot rocketing 10 times because you get so much dust in your face and up your nose.
That reminds me of every sales presentation I did with you. Immediately before those doors open, you had to, snot rocket in the hallway.
Could you imagine, like, in front of a customer, just like, oh my God, that'd be hilarious. But that just felt like it was a real moment that happened. Like, they were prepping to, like, spar, and he just did that, and the director's like, we're keeping that in the movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was real or not, but, like, when I first saw that, I was like, oh, it just felt like that's, for some reason, that made him, like, scarier to me. But he flexes his pecs, and he, like, when before he punches the guy and kills him, he, like, puts his hand up in the air and, like, makes a fist and then punches him and kills him. And after his victories, he kind of, like, he pumps his arms and he riles the crowd up. He just felt like a real scary villain. I loved his theatrics. It's like one of my favorite sequences in the movie is like his whole end scene in the Kumite.
Yeah, I think both of these movies that we're covering today, without the villain, we would not be here today.
Right.
Like that.
Right.
That's what makes it believable. It makes it worth fighting for. So one of my favorite moments in the film is, I was just talking a bit about Victor Lin, and the first time that he meets Frank Dukes and Ray Jackson, first thing he says when he walks up, he's like, "I'm Lin, you Jackson, you look like a Jackson," and that must make you Frank Dukes.
Right.
Frank Dukes is like, "No, it's Dukes." He's like, "Oh, right, like put up your Dukes."
And no coincidence that I had ducks in my pool. I mean, do you see how all this is connected, man? It's like we're so in tune with the universe here, Baxter. It's crazy.
And the Illuminati, it all ties in. There's another favorite line in the movie. It's just a real quick thing, but he's like, Victor shows up to the judges and he's like, "What's the holdup?" And they're like, he says Senso Tanaka is his Shidoshi. He's like, "What's the difference if Bruce Springsteen is his Shidoki?" And that's like relevant for the time, right? Like Bruce Springsteen wasn't couldn't have been bigger in 1988.
Look, this movie is not well acted. Let's just get that out of the way right now, whether we talk about it in more depth or not. But there are some good zingers, And that guy, he delivered most of them. I like the scene in this movie where he's got to prove that he is a student of Tanaka, and they're like, "You got to do the dim mak then." And the dim mak is like kind of this acupressure attack where you kind of focus your energy, and then he hits the bricks, but it only breaks the bottom brick. And apparently if you do that to somebody, you can hit a pressure point in their body and kill them instantly. I like this. This to me feels like the same way I felt in Karate Kid Part 2 when Daniel-san is about to chop through the blocks of ice, in Okinawa, where you kind of have to focus all your energy, and it doesn't really matter what the substrate is. You're just going to go through it. There's always seems to be that scene where you have to prove yourself, and breaking shit seems the way that you have to prove yourself that you're a legitimate martial artist in the 80s. So.
Well, and equal to you were talking about the white man or white boy coming to the mystical Asian man to give him powers. Right. It was always the white guy was never worthy of the gift, right? So they had to prove themselves. So in Karate Kid, it's they're going to push you to the limit. They're going to hope that you quit, and you got to prove that you're not going to quit. You're going to paint the fence, you're going to sand the floor, you're going to wax on, wax off. Mm-hmm. That's a recurring theme. And it's usually the underdog, right? It's not the guy that's a successful businessman or the bully or the whatever. It's always the underdog who's either getting their ass kicked or they're getting beaten down or they can't keep their job. They're just down and out. And so similar to the Dimak here is then there, once you've proven yourself and you're accepted by your master, other people are now going to doubt you. So your master's accepted you and he's trained you in these mystical martial arts. But now you're going to show up to the Kumite and they're going to go, first of all, white boy, how can you be part of this Tanaka clan? And then prove it. You got to prove it to us.
Let me show you with this ancient technique.
He does that. And something that stands out to me, I don't know if you're familiar with the DJ Steve Aoki.
Yeah, Benihana's son. Yeah.
His record label is called Dimmak.
Is it?
Dimmak Records. And so I didn't ever make that connection that, Death Touch.
Did you know his father started the Benihana chain?
Yes.
That to me is kind of a remarkable interesting thing that your son could be very successful in a completely different path. So
this is pretty typical of our podcast going way off, but there's a great Steve Aoki documentary. I believe it's on Netflix,
right?
But it covers his whole life. He was like a straight edge hardcore kid back in the day, really into punk music, hardcore, all that, not really into DJing or whatever, and then kind of evolved into that. But his dad was so extremely successful, and he was he really had to push for acceptance from his father. So even when he's like this world-renowned DJ, his dad it seems like was this like kind of like showman. I think he like raced cars and he did all sorts of stuff.
A very demanding sensei, you know, again, another theme in all of these movies, right? Awesome.
So another, you know, very common stalwart of 80s movies is the montage scene. And not only just the montage, but the music in the montage. The music makes the montage. You know, think of Rocky.
Totally.
Think of anything. Obviously, Karate Kid, as we were talking about. The montage song in this movie is one of my favorite moments. It's called Fight to Survive. You hear that song, I am struggling to stay in my seat and watch the rest of the movie because I need to find a sensei. I need to get out there. I need to kick some ass.
Yeah.
I need to find some bullies down the street just so that I can get in an altercation with them and set them straight. This song was written by Paul Hertz, who did the score to the movie, and Stan Bush. Stan Bush is famously known for writing and recording the song The Touch for the 1986 movie The Transformers the Movie, which is a very famous animated film, most famous for killing Optimus Prime in 1986 of all times. I mean, we're talking this just came out and you're already killing.
Shocking news event.
Yeah, one of the saddest movies ever. And in taking it even a step further and creating a fun fact here, The Touch was actually written for the Sylvester Stallone movie Cobra, and they decided not to use it, but the same studio was doing the Transformers, the movie, gets put in there, becomes a big hit. Then he goes on to write Fight to Survive. It's a reason to get up in the morning.
Totally. How can you talk about the best sequences in the movies and not talk about the Jean-Claude Van Damme splits, which he does in just about every movie, but Bloodsport he does like 7 different times, which I guess really becomes somewhat of his signature move. In one of them, he famously splits and uppercuts his opponent right in the nuts, and that is vintage cinema, and then that move will repeat later on in pop culture. Ryan, there's some technical difficulties. I can't hear you right now.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
We got a listener question, or actually comment here. They used some expletives in the Transformers the movie, and it blew our listener's mind as a child.
Right on.
So my final favorite moment of Bloodsport is actually the finale of the film. You know, the whole fight sequence between Frank and Chong Li. We've got him throwing dust in Frank's eyes. He's got to use all his training to be able to get out of the situation. Frank actually jumps off the back of the referee.
That's a great move.
Just, you know, the big thing about these 80s action movies is you gotta end with a bang. You gotta leave the theater at the peak of the peak. And maybe there's like a little short scene after that, but there's got to be some sort of victory. There's got to be another reason to bring back that montage song. And the end of this movie rocks.
Yeah, that's a pretty killer scene.
So another thing we like to do on the Collect and Destroy podcast is dig into some fun facts about the movies we're discussing. You know, I'll start out, Ken, if you don't mind. This movie, as we have mentioned, was based on the life of a real life Frank Dukes, who was actually brought in as the fight coordinator for this film. And unbelievably, he claimed that Jean-Claude Van Damme was not in shape enough to play himself. So he put him through a rigorous 3-month training program. And Van Damme at that time was a world champion martial artist in his own right. And he had said that this was the hardest training of his entire life.
That's just a ridiculous statement, by the way. I mean, Van Damme, arguably like the best shape, you know, actor of all time. I mean, how many other actors do you see where they put like part of the training montages, they tie him up by ropes and like spread his limbs out in every direction? I mean, he's legit. I don't think we mentioned it yet, but like Van Damme was legit. He enrolled in Shotokan karate when he was a kid. He took ballet. He took Muay Thai. He was, you know, a legitimate fighter.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, award-winning fighter, champion fighter. So for Frank Dukes, who's Frank Dukes, by the way? You know what I mean? To say that Van Damme's not in shape for this movie is a ridiculous statement. But anyway, fun fact here. Let's go back to my boy here, Chung Lee. Bolo Young, great actor. He's got some zingers, some one-liners in this movie, but they're similar to what he actually had said in his other roles in Bruce Lee's film. So when we talked about the Dim Mak earlier, and you know, he punched those bricks, you know, through that sort of acupressure move. Chong Li says, "Brick don't hit back." Well, in Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee's kicking boards, and he says to Bruce Lee, "Boards don't hit back," which I think is pretty funny, just sort of the parallels to that. But in real life, Bruce Lee and Bolo Young were buddies. They trained together. I think Bruce Lee trained him. But he was a legit dude. And he was also, I think his preferred martial arts is Tai Chi. He was Korean. But he's a former he played Korean in his character was from Korea, but he was a Hong Kong bodybuilding champion. So legit dude. He won the title in '67. Fun facts about our friend Bolo Young.
I actually thought this was a photo of you and I standing side by side at first.
Dude, look at the difference in their pecs. It's crazy. I know. For our listeners who can't see, this is a picture of Bruce Lee standing next to Bolo Young. And Bruce Lee, you've probably seen him like with his wingspan and his like tight pectorals. This guy's just got like massive muscles in comparison.
And that, I think, too, is probably how he landed a lot of those roles, because he just stood out in a crowd of dudes. Like,
yeah, I mean, you know,
Enter the Dragon, you like instantly, your eyes are drawn to this one guy that stands out in the crowd.
Yeah, yeah.
So as I had mentioned, the movie was touted as a true story, but doubts have arisen. Most martial arts enthusiasts view the real Frank Dukes accounts of competing in secret tournaments as complete fiction, along with his claim he was an underground CIA operative. It's now generally accepted that the real Frank Dukes, he basically just lied his way into Hollywood. Mm-hmm. Records obtained through the Freedom of Information Act show he was only in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve and was never posted overseas, let alone in Southeast Asia. So he's saying he's over there. There's now proof that he never was. The CIA has no record of him ever working for them. His personal brand of martial arts, Dukes Ryu Jitsu, is a complete fabrication. And Frank Dukes has likely never won or even competed in a single martial arts tournament. Additionally, Frank Dukes never has and does not hold any of the world records listed at the end of the film. Like his own backstory and claims of Kumate's success are likely, they're just all pure fiction. I think this is probably less shocking now to hear this than it would have been in 1988 or 1990 or 1994. At the time, Frank Dukes, like, people knew who this guy was. He would like do interviews. He'd be on TV.
Well, you know how this all got picked up was that, like, there's like, you know, in the early 80s, there was Black Belt magazine and there was Karate magazine. And they ran a story on this dude, Frank Dukes. And that's how Hollywood got wind of him. And that's how he ended up sort of selling this whole story to Hollywood. So basically, you know, pre-internet, when there's very little, you know, avenues for information to get out there, these magazines were like, they're just looking for interesting stuff to write. They pick a story up about Frank Dukes, and then all of a sudden it snowballs into this Hollywood thing. I'm trying to figure out how to lie my way into Hollywood. Maybe instead of 2 ducks in my pool, it was like 2 bald eagles, and I raised them, and now, you know, I'm like the Beast Master, and I fight crime with 2 eagles that obey my command. What do you think? Think it's
I think that you change your name to Frank Ducks.
I don't want to be the Duck Master, though.
Frank
dude.
Ducks, you look like Frank Ducks.
The duck. I'm like the Duck Whisperer, you know. Anyway, moving on, dude. We talked about it before when we were introducing Ray Jackson, Ogre. they play a video game together, and that's like kind of when they first get to know each other and they meet. Van Damme beats him up. In that video game is Karate Champ, and this was like my favorite scene in the movie. Well, one of my favorite scenes in the movie, because this was by far my favorite video game as a kid. So I grew up in that sweet spot in the 80s.
So you actually played this game,
dude? I could still do the moves. Like if you double tap to the left, that's how you do the spinning kick. That's how you do the spinning roundhouse kick. I still know it. I'm not a huge gamer now, so the video games that I did play in my life have very significant memories for me. And Karate Champ by far is like the game that I would go and play in the arcade until Dragon's Lair came out, and then I'd spend all my money sucking at Dragon's Lair, and that was like a decade later. So
Frank Duck's Karate Champ Master.
Yeah, Karate Champ is great. Best game.
Well, and this is another thing that was very popular in the 80s and 90s was the dawn of the martial arts based video games. We had Double Dragon, we had Kung Fu. I remember playing Kung Fu for the original 8-bit NES. And that was a really cool, like level by level, like platformer kind of stage. Streets of Rage, obviously Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. Like it was such a fad. And I mean, it still exists to this day.
Mm-hmm.
So another fun fact, I always love when things end up in the movie that actually happened. So in this situation, the fighter Hossein, played by Mariano, was actually knocked unconscious by Jean-Claude Van Damme. He elbowed him in the face in the fight. So you can go back, you can watch the movie, you can see him get hit in the elbow with the face. The actual knockout made it into the film. So pretty cool.
I'm going to jump back to one more arcade reference in my last fun fact here. Video game developer John Tobias was pitching his idea for a video game called Mortal Kombat. And the difference, Mortal Kombat was significant because they were casting live martial artists as the basis of the action. And Midway wanted Jean-Claude Van Damme to be the basis of this video game. And Van Damme, when they came to him to propose this idea, he had started to build his way up in the, Hollywood world. So he was already like filming Universal Soldier. So he was like, no, I can't be a video game guy now. But they had already taken the video game down a certain level of development already and based Johnny Cage off of him. So much so that they did one of his fatalities or one of his moves was the split and the crotch punch. So even though Van Damme rejected that being the star of Mortal Kombat, the video game, his move ended up being in that video game and going on to infamous pop culture legend. And then later on, another ironic twist, he ends up being, the lead character in Street Fighter, which Mortal Kombat was trying to emulate the success of. So all these weird interconnections between video games and Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter and Van Damme, direct, indirect, really kind of interesting. But you'll even see the attire of
that's what I was going to say.
Looks like the attire of Frank Dukes. Yeah, just the black sash and the sash belt.
And so then they tried to say like, hey, you just ripped off Jean-Claude Van Damme. And they said, no, this is supposed to be based on Danny Rand, who is Iron Fist from Marvel.
Right.
Which he looks nothing like Iron Fist. I mean, I guess maybe the pants a little bit, but he looks a heck of a lot more like JCVD than he does as Iron Fist.
Oh, he's just a character that does the splits and punches people in the groin.
Highly recommend Netflix's High Score, which is a great documentary series. It reminds me a lot of actually Toys That Made Us, which is another great documentary series. Each about a franchise of toys. Now you got High Score, which really kind of covers the full gamut of the history of video games. So everything from, Pac-Man up until, what's going on today. But there's a whole segment on Mortal Kombat and gives a lot of insight into this whole situation.
Yeah.
What was your go-to character in Mortal Kombat?
I was a Raiden guy.
All right. Lightning.
Which I think was, riffed off of the character in Big Trouble in Little China with Kurt Russell, which is a great movie.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not a gamer, but Mortal Kombat, if you wanted to get me and sit down for 8 hours and play one video game, Mortal Kombat would be the top of my list. The only games that I ever really played were either fighting games, usually Mortal Kombat. I'd play Street Fighter, I'd play whatever you had, or NHL hockey. That was like the two things that I would play. But Mortal Kombat, it's like my McDonald's for me. Like, I still like McDonald's more than any other fast food. I still like Mortal Kombat more than any other video game.
Yeah,
Well,
I would
what's
say
your
like
character? Who's your go-to?
Sub-Zero. I was always
Yeah.
Sub-Zero. I would say to this day, like similarly, like as much as I like video games, I don't really have time to play them. I think there's only 2 games that I make time to play, which is Doom, which the new Doom and Doom Eternal are sick, especially if you like the originals.
Yeah.
The most heavy metal video game I've ever played in my life, the most violent, gory, best music, most metal music video game is the new Doom. The other one would be like Mario and Madden, I guess. But like, I just don't have time for video games. So rarely do I get to sit down and play them. But I will say no matter what console I've had, I've always had a copy of Mortal Kombat. So, I think I've got like Mortal Kombat 10 or 11 right now, probably 10. I don't know. I don't think I have 11 yet, but I'm always picking up a version of the latest game because it's just nostalgia, right?
What version are they on now?
I think 11.
Okay. What do you have a gaming system now?
I'm behind. So we have the Wii U and we have the PS4. So
I don't have one. I haven't had one since like whatever was first, the Nintendo 64 or the Sega Genesis or whatever was last. I don't even know. It's terrible. Look, our boy Mikey. What's up, Kessler? He says Scorpion's his guy. I would probably prefer Scorpion over Sub-Zero. But I did like Kung Lao too in the later versions, and I'm glad that he was put in the movie version. Something about
I was
hat
say
with
with
like a
the
razor
movie,
rim
like,
on it. It seemed like a cool thing.
Getting the franchise restarted in the movies. There's just so many characters. So it's kind of cool. You can do like Game of Thrones level surprise deaths.
Right.
And just move on to the next set of characters because there's so much to pull from.
Yeah.
Well developed characters. So let's move on to our second portion of our double feature, which is 1989's Kickboxer. Kickboxer is a 1989 American martial arts film produced and directed by Mark DeSalle, who had previously produced Bloodsport. So producer in 1 year, the next year he becomes the director. In this film, Eric Sloan, played by Dennis Alexio, is an American kickboxing pro helped by his brother Kurt, played by Jean-Claude Van Damme, in his quest for glory. But when the two go to Thailand to take on legendary Tong Po, played by Michelle Kissy, the opponent viciously beats Eric and leaves him paralyzed.
Right.
Swearing vengeance, Kurt tracks down Master Zhen Chao and begins learning the sport of Muay Thai himself, while also getting caught up in the criminal intrigue involving thuggish crime boss Freddie Lee. When did you first see this? What are your takeaways of this one? Hit me with it.
Same thing. This kind of fell into that, me and the roommates there in sophomore year of or junior year of college. We were on our movie marathons, and it was around the same time that we were watching all the same actors in all their movies, somewhere in that time frame, mid 90s. What about you? I don't remember any great scenes in the theater or anything else. It was just like all of a sudden just Jean-Claude Van Damme was there. I felt like,
I feel like a lot of the movies that we cover on this podcast from the 80s, they're just like in the public consciousness. So whether it's in repeat on cable or you rented it on VHS, there's not I don't have like a great anecdote when I first stumbled upon it. And these two movies, honestly, kind of bleed together, right? Because
the plot
one year apart, similar kind of plot, similar main character. But what stands out to me is the great martial arts montage training. Totally. Obviously Tong Po memorable big bad. Kurt is just like this innocent, good-hearted kid, and so you can't help but want to like root for him. And similarly to how Bloodsport was kind of like this MMA film, this movie was like introducing the world to Muay Thai kickboxing.
Right.
So there wasn't a lot of exposure to Muay Thai, and this kind of brought it again up to the public consciousness. Just a lot of great scenes, memorable characters.
I think this movie is there's only a year difference in this movie, but like, man, what a year. What happens?
Yeah.
Like, did you go to acting school or something? Like, because this movie just feels more professional than Bloodsport does. Although I think Bloodsport sat on the shelf for 2 years before it actually got produced.
Yeah.
So it came out in 88. It probably should have come out in 86. But Kickboxer feels like a more polished, finished product. The acting is better, like all around. It's just, although there are just very, like you said already, the plot lines are so very similar in this thing, just like different countries. So,
yeah, I think that there's a little bit more of like where in the first movie it's like the underground tournament. This one, there's actually like a thing you're fighting for,
right?
Which is like avenging his brother being paralyzed, which is pretty extreme. And then it gets even worse with Tong Po and the love interest and stuff like that. Like there's a dark element to this movie that makes you root even more for the good guy. And let's get into the cast a little bit. The good guy that I mentioned is Jean-Claude Van Damme is playing Kurt Sloan. He's the cornerman for his older brother, Eric Sloan. And, you know, like I said, he's out to avenge what happened to his brother.
Yeah. And Eric Sloan is played by Dennis Alexio, who's like the perfect brother in the 80s film. I believe that's a real mustache. That doesn't seem to be a fake mustache. And it is a glorious mustache. He's cocky. He's arrogant. He's overconfident. He picks up a hooker as soon as he lands in the country. Like you know something bad is going to happen to him just because of his mustache and the fact that he literally is there for 5 minutes and he gets a hooker. Like, you know, eventually something bad is going to happen to him. So I think they just set the stage immediately with his character.
Dennis Chan plays Zen Chow, Kurt's Muay Thai crew. At times, he feels like a more sadistic version of Mr. Miyagi. Just the way that he like tortures Kurt. And totally. I think it's easier to torture like a grown man as opposed to like a kid in Karate Kid. But he does a really great job at putting Kurt through the ringer to get him ready for Tong Po.
And he's like the uncle of the love interest, right? So
correct.
Of course Miley. You're gonna have like the tough teacher, and of course you're gonna fall for his relative. You know, that's just another just another universal truth in 80s movies.
Yep, of course.
Haskell Anderson plays Winston Taylor. Winston Taylor is the retired American Special Forces, you know, agent who kind of knows everything. You know, he's like, oh, you need a trainer? I might know a guy. Oh, you know, you need this? I might know a guy. You know, you need a tank. You need me to rescue you at the end. You need a arsenal of weapons. I might have that. You know, you always need a friend like that. And like,
yes,
they get introduced because I think he gets thrown into his lap, like out of the ring, and he like lands on him, and he's got like 2 chicks with him too. He's like, you need a girl? I got a girl, you know? So you always have to have a buddy who like is in the network. You know, I got a guy.
Well, and the plot of the movie is like they're in a strange land.
Yeah,
you know? Like
he's a great cast.
And this guy is like he's been here. He knows the ropes.
Yeah.
Oh, your brother's paralyzed, and they threw him out on the street. I'm here to pick him up with my van.
Yeah.
Right. It's great when he just like kicks the girls out. He's like, I'll party with you later.
Right. You know, and at the end, it's like, you know, you question his integrity, but of course he like comes through at the end. Like, you know, he's always there. So like he has his character redemption, you know, the arc. So, you know, classic 80s cinema stuff.
Absolutely. We already talked about the love interest, which is Miley, Zhen Chao's niece, played by Rochelle Ashana. You know, the brawl at the market that Miley runs is like just such a great way to intro like them meeting each other. I also think that the little montage before that scene is hilarious. He's like splashing the kids with the water out of the town fountain, and like
this movie is like chock full of montage. There's lots of it's spread on thick, man. Half the movie is training montage, which I love. So
that's what I was gonna say. Is if I could see very easily how people would watch a movie like this and be like, "Oh, this is terrible." Right. But like, if you're into montages and you're into these '80s classics, this is just. You're just like pour it on like more. And that's how I feel about the cheesy lines too. Like I know like even, Bloodsport, we're talking about the terrible acting, but like the cheesy lines and terrible acting are also some of the best parts of that movie.
Yeah. You already mentioned like the baddest character in this movie, played by Michelle Kissy. He's Tong the Tiger Po. I mean, this dude, he's got the look too, like Chong Li had the look in Bloodsport. He's got the look, the shaved head, the long ponytail.
Terrifying.
He's maniacal when he kicks a concrete pillar, in like that pre-fight scene. And he's got all the moves too. He's got the brutal elbows and the flying knees. I'm sure we should probably talk about who's the better villain here, but he is a great villain, man. He's got that look.
Yeah, it looks like he enjoys inflicting pain.
Yeah, totally.
Let's dig into some of our favorite moments. I'll kick off with just the scene of Eric Sloan and Kurt Sloan cruising into Bangkok on a little boat.
Oh yeah.
The wind blowing through their hair. Eric's wearing like this like incredibly bright Hawaiian shirt, and Kurt's wearing this great denim on denim. He's like shirtless with a denim vest and jeans, and they're like arms around each other and like just soaking it in.
This is like when people talk about Jean-Claude Van Damme, they have to talk about his attire. Not just in Kickboxer, in every I know you and I both, we watched a lot of movies to get some background on this dude.
Yeah.
In every movie he's in, the one universal truth is that he loves wearing denim on denim. He loves big billowy denim shirts tucked into high-waisted pants.
You know what that's called, right? That's called the Canadian tuxedo.
Well, it's definitely called bad 80s. I mean, I guess they just haven't had fitted shirts then, dude. It's terrible. He rocks it though. But geez, man, I think his pants come up like over his navel half the time. It's killer.
Speechless.
Anyways, we talked about it. The training montage. I feel like half this movie is a training montage. But if you don't like training montages in Kickboxer and you don't like training montages like in Rocky IV when he goes to Russia, then guess what? Then you don't want to work out. You're not American. Then you don't even have a heart, because there is zero chance you can watch this and not get fired up. I get fired up just talking about it. When I'm watching it for the first time, forget it. I'm walking down the street. Sign me up, Tiger Shulman. I'm there. Start me in karate class immediately, please.
Related to that montage, one of the parts of the training that's my favorite part is Kurt. A common thing in Muay Thai, and we saw it with Tong Po kicking the concrete, but the common thing is to practice on bamboo, on banana trees, kick. And he's kicking this tree and he's just looking defeated. He's like, I can't do this anymore. Yeah. And then his teacher looks at him and he says, remember your brother. And right there, he's got flashes of his brother, getting beat down and paralyzed. Immediately just goes to town on this tree, kicking it nonstop, super aggressive until he chops the tree down.
I know. I almost wish I had a brother, and I almost wish he was paralyzed just so I could pull that inspiration. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have any kind of shit like that motivates me. Was that a terrible thing to say? Anyway,
that's I don't know how, but I'm gonna try to arrange that for your headstone on your grave. I wish
It's
I had a
happening
brother,
now.
and if I did have a brother, I wished he was paralyzed.
Anyway, moving on. But let's talk about maybe not just the best movie, not just the scene in this movie, but maybe like the best scene in any Jean-Claude Van Damme movie ever is when he gets taken to the bar as part of his training, does some shots, gets a little tipsy or more than tipsy, and his trainer says, "Look, dude, why don't you go and dance with those girls?" And he gets up. I mean, this is like internet meme, animated GIF gold today. His dance moves in this scene are so bad, they're so good. To me, though, but then then his master says, like, "Hey, this guy's insulting your girlfriends to like the locals over there or their mothers or something to get them to elicit a fight." And he's so drunk. Then it's more like an homage to Jackie Chan Drunken Master, where like totally inebriated and very fluid, he does all these moves and like completes his training and kicks the shit out of these guys. All in. That is just cinema gold, dude. The terrible dancing, the meme worthy moves, I mean, he does some of his signature like split kicks, and I mean it's by far the best scene in this movie, and quite possibly the best scene in any Jean-Claude Van Damme movie of all time. So,
well, and let's talk about what he's wearing. He's wearing like a black tank top, but like the tank top is like connected by suspenders.
Yeah, I don't you have
I have never seen this clothing item in my entire life.
We should Google that. Like, I think next time you go to the gym, you should wear that. Like, all seriousness,
One of my favorite moments, kind of similar to Bloodsport, is the final showdown in this movie, in which they are taking their hands, which are wrapped in ropes, dipping in resin, and then dipping it in broken glass.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
which is how I like to walk into sales meetings.
Well, I take the honorable approach, though. I take my glass off and I just beat your ass without it because I don't need it. You know what I mean? Oh, my bad. We're still going here.
You're thinking about your potential brother again.
Yeah, I thought we were moving on to fun facts in here, but there is a memorable moment that I must share. I did not realize this until I rewatched this movie. There is when Tong Po is warming up, when he's about to fight Van Damme, he does some moves, and he kind of like he raises his knee and he slaps his hand. He's like sort of miming like knee kicks. I didn't realize this, but anytime I like pretend I'm gonna fight somebody and do some martial arts on them, I do the knee slap. I did not realize that I had stolen this move from Kickboxer. I have been doing this for like 25 years. Literally, I've been doing this move for 25 years and did not realize until we rewatched it earlier this week that I took it from Kickboxer. So I love how life comes full circle, and like I feel like I've realized my inspirations so many years later because of this little podcast that we do. It's amazing.
That, ladies and gentlemen, we call a Ken Hoffman fun fact.
Dude, that's what we're here for, just to share.
So one little fun fact about the movie Kickboxer is that Dennis Alexio, who plays Eric Sloan, real mustache, not a stunt mustache. He was actually a world light heavyweight and world cruiserweight kickboxing champion in real life. And in fact, the title that the title he's holding up over his head is not the actual belt that he won, but he did win the actual title that he wins in the movie. So they call it by name. They just made up a different belt for it. But dude was legit, and kind of helps in a role where you need to play a world-class kickboxing champion.
Yeah, and he was in two other movies. He had two bit parts, but he never was like, he was not a guy who parlayed his martial arts experience into a movie career. So that was like his real big claim to fame. But all the fight scenes that happen in this were choreographed by Jean-Claude. So that does, I think, give some credit to like his legitimacy as a fighter. I mean, we talked about that already. He was the real deal. Jean-Claude also had, a career of professional fighting before he started his movie career, and he had a bunch of accolades in there. But he was able to take that experience and choreograph this movie, all the fight scenes. Bruce Lee did the same thing. That I think separates what these types of stars are. They're like legitimate martial arts stars, and then they become these like movie stars. So it's sort of this a really interesting journey, and I think really adds legitimacy if you're the star of the film to also choreograph the fight scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. The scene, if you recall, when he's doing training and they attach meat to him, to Kurt, and he gets chased by a dog, that was also pulled from real life. So Jean-Claude, when he was training real life martial arts, he was putting on a suit and attacked by attack dogs. So a little bit of biographical content there, which again comes from having real life martial arts experiences and being able to translate those, write those into the film and then act them out.
Yeah, speaking of real life martial artists, I think one of the best, our boy Chuck Norris, also internet meme god. He wanted to or was supposed to play the role of Kurt Sloan, but the director of the movie had promised it and very much wanted it to be Jean-Claude. Norris wanted to buy the rights to this movie, but he couldn't. But interestingly enough, though, they did run in the same circles, Jean-Claude Van Damme and Chuck Norris. In fact, I think JCVD trained Norris for a little bit. He was a background. He was he played a bit like a stunt guy in Missing in Action. He was, and these movies were released through Canon Films, which Chuck was a big part of. So there was a connection between these guys. At one point, JCVD even bounced at a bar that either he or Norris's wife owned, which I think is a really kind of fun thing. But they, I don't think they ever actually starred in a film together until The Expendables 2. So that wasn't until 2012. So these guys were in the same circle, but never were on film together until much later.
So in the film, Kurt's going around after the incident with his brother, and he's trying to find somewhere where he can learn true Muay Thai. So he's already a fighter. He has fighting experience, but he's looking to learn the Muay Thai way so that he can combat against somebody like Tong Po. There's a whole sequence of events where he's out searching, and part of that leads him to a Muay Thai gym in Bangkok. And that gym has like a bunch of kids and young men in it, all training and stuff like that. And that was actually a real gym up until 2003. It was called Sor Thenecule Gym of Bangkok, and it would house 50 fighters at a time. So again, another real aspect which just supports something like this. And instead of creating a fake gym, they're going to a real gym, and those are real fighters. No actors needed for that.
Do you think we could walk into a gym in Thailand right now and get, ask for lessons and they'd give it to us? Or do you think we'd have to go?
I have a friend who actually did that. He went and lived in Asia for, I don't know how long he was there, but he went there to train Muay Thai.
I would assume you'd have to have some sort of background already in martial arts like Van Damme did. I mean, Van Damme walked in there and he already knew Shotokan karate. He already knew, Taekwondo. He already was a ballet dancer. He could, jump over your head and do a backflip. So I feel like you have to have some experience before you can even walk into one of these places.
Yeah, I think too, a big factor, as in most areas of the world, is money.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the conversion rate is, but if you go to Bangkok, like, are you living pretty good? Like, if you have X amount of money to spend, like, maybe they welcome you with open arms, and even with little to no experience. I mean, you could probably go in there, Ken, and be like, well, I watched 10 Jean-Claude Van Damme movies in 1 week, so I'm ready for this.
Right. If I shave my head like Tong Po and grow a ponytail, maybe they'll accept me, In this movie, though, they actually credit the character Tong Po as playing himself, Tong Po. There is no Tong Po. Michel Kissy is the actor, and in fact, Michel Kissy was although he was born in Morocco, he moved to Brussels when he was a little kid, when he was 2, and he and JCVD were buddies. They were buddies as kids. They grew up together. They trained together. They fell in love with action films, and they moved to the States together, both with the dream of being in movies together. And they were. He was in Bloodsport. He had hair in Bloodsport. He was like in a blue gi. He was one of the guys that was fighting in one of the other matches, but he was in that movie. He was in this movie, as his main opponent. Went on to be in the rest of the Kickboxer series. And then they were also both extras in Breakin', the original Breakin' movie together. So I think pretty cool. Like, you always hook up your boys, and they were always tight friends, and they moved together from Belgium. I think that's kind of a neat story.
Yeah, the other 3 JCVD movies he was in Bloodsport, he's the guy who gets his leg broken.
Oh, okay.
By Chong Li. In Lionheart, he plays Mustafa, who, alongside another Legionnaire, is trying to bring Lion back from America back to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And then he is he played Tong Po in the sequel to Kickboxer 2. And then he was also in Kickboxer Vengeance in 2016, which was the remake. That one's kind of weird because he just has a brief in-joke cameo where he's a prisoner and he remarks to Jean-Claude Van Damme's character, "You forgot about me?" as he walks past his cell.
Right. But he didn't, because he hooked his buddy up with a movie part, right? That's the best. Yep. That's the best thing. You hook your buddies up. When I get my eagle fighting movie, I'll hook you up, dude. Don't worry about it. I'll bring you along. You can be an.
All right, you know what that sound means? It's time to head into the pit. In this segment, we pit 2 or more things against each other in the ultimate fight to the death. In this week's Into the Pit, we have the battle for JCVD greatness as 1988's Bloodsport goes head-to-head with 1989's Kickboxer to see who emerges victorious.
Mm-hmm.
Flawless victory.
Flawless.
Ken, your thoughts?
Here's what I want to do. I want to take parts of both of these movies and put them together and make the masterclass Jean-Claude Van Damme blood kickboxer sport. You know what I mean? I think that there's good parts of both of these movies. I feel that they're very similar. Is one better than the other? I think, like we mentioned already, the acting in Bloodsport is awful. The whole plot line with Forrest Whitaker and the other commander, they're totally unnecessary. Write it out. In fact, it's an embarrassment. That whole scene when they shoot the stun gun at him. Terrible. Take it out. Kickboxer, way more polished. Better story, better fight montage, training scene. But I think the whole tournament, the Kumite, is way better. I do like Tong Po's look, but I think Chong Li is a scarier villain. I think that that movie ending is better than the Kickboxer ending. So I kind of want to mash them up and make one great movie rather than try to tell you which is the better of these 2 movies. I don't know.
Yeah, you got to think it's 2 films that are only 1 year apart.
Right.
So that's why it's so easy in the memory of these movies to blend them together. As I talked about earlier, Bloodsport's more of the MMA tournament. Kickboxer's more of the Muay Thai kickboxing lesson. You got to look at the side characters. So in Bloodsport, you got Victor Lin and you got Ray Jackson, and those are killer side characters.
Great.
But then in Kickboxer, I think that the teacher's better, right? Your Muay Thai crew and Zhen Trao, I think, is a little bit better, more established, and obviously Haskell Anderson as Winston Taylor.
Winston Taylor is a great character, and look, so's his brother. I mean, you have to have an Eric Sloan. Like, that storyline is better. Like, there's a real reason to fight. Your buddy,
I was gonna say, yeah, you got more of a reason.
you know, he was angry at Chong Li for beating up, you know, Ray Jackson, and but he wasn't paralyzed. And don't forget, you just met him when you got there. You know what I mean? He's not your brother. You don't even know him that well. So, like, to me, that's a thinner plot line. So the Kickboxer story is a better story, I think. But the scenes, I love the fact that, like, the blood on the mat shows up in the first match of Bloodsport. They don't clean it. The mat is dirty the entire rest of the movie. For, like, the next 3 days of Bloodsport there, those blood stains just continue to pile up, and they never have, like, a new mat that comes in. It feels realer. And in fact, aside from Ogre, all of those fighters were legitimate fighters. They didn't cast actors. They casted legitimate martial artists. So the choreography could be better.
You bring up a good point. Like, if you watch a UFC pay-per-view, you'll be watching one of the headlining fights on the main card, and they'll go over to a section of the mat where they're fighting, and the ground is already covered in blood. They wiped it, but it's all blood stained.
Right.
And that's real. That's real. And then you go, man, what did we miss?
Right.
What happened earlier? Because, like, all it takes is one little thing on your eyebrow to open up, and there's just blood everywhere. Both these films are underground fights. They're both dangerous. They got the criminal ties. The soundtracks, the scores are killer. Like, neither one do you listen to the movie and go, this doesn't get me amped. Like, even the music, when Chong Li and Ray Jackson are fighting, just go back to that scene and listen to just the score in that part. Oh man, it's just gets you pumped,
gets you fired up.
And both, I mean, Jean-Claude is, like, incredibly jacked in both movies. Like, he looks awesome.
Right.
So I have 3 points of criteria, and this, I think, decides my decision.
Okay.
And I'll kind of give you my response here, and then you can kind of give me your final verdict, maybe with this same 3 points of criteria. But first, I look at what's the better plot.
Okay.
I like both plots, but I think that the plot in Kickboxer is a little bit stronger. They're in the jungle. They're again, the avenging your brother thing is stronger. The first one is optional. He's just there. He's not supposed to be there, but, like, no one knows and no one cares.
Yeah.
In if anything else, in Kickboxer, you're doing this for your brother. So I give the better plot to Kickboxer.
Agreed.
My second point would be, what's the better villain? And they're both really scary, but I'm much more scared of Tong Po.
Oh, really?
And I mean, because, like, Chong Li, that's like looking at myself in the mirror. And Tong Po, though, is, like, scary. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, he just is more of a monster to me, not physically, but, like, overall, like, the way he carries himself.
I think it's a pretty even draw there. The Snot Rocket gives Chong Li the edge in my vote, just because I've never seen anybody do that before or after. So,
my third criteria would be the setting of the film.
Yes,
and I would also, so you're in Hong Kong in Bloodsport. It's this underground thing and all that. Well, guess what? In Kickboxer, they have the underground thing. Like, at the end of the movie, they're in that underground fighting pit. But I like the whole jungle aspect. It kind of opens things up. You get some fresh air. You get diversity of the setting. So on all 3 of those, I'm going to go Kickboxer, which I think makes up my decision.
Right. I'm going to go same thing, setting as well. Kickboxer's better. The story's more believable. I think maybe the ending is a little bit better in Bloodsport because of the actual fight scene is better than this fight scene with Tong Po. They're pretty equal villains, but my edge is going to be, it's a better story. It's a little bit more polished. Kickboxer edges out Bloodsport in my eyes a little bit.
All right, Ken. So in preparation for this, we watched a lot of Jean-Claude Van Damme movies,
We did.
specifically in the time frame of the mid '80s to the mid '90s, I would say. Um, and even before preparing for this, I think I watched like last year. I think alone, I watched like 5 different of the Kickboxer series on my own just for fun. Then we did this, and it was like, okay, it's go time.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I was surprised at how much I loved these movies. Like there were very few movies, maybe 2 out of all of the movies I watched, which was probably about 10 or 12 movies.
Right.
I would say of those, I maybe didn't like 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I was very much in favor of those movies. Some of them I had never seen. Some
Right.
of them it had been so long that they were stripped from my mind. Some I thought I was going to like because of some of the background information I had on them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I watched it and I was like, this movie's whack. But, let's dive into, this is a new segment. It's film recommendations.
Yep.
So let's dive in.
Well, I'm gonna agree with everything that you said before we dive in. I also watched like 10 or 12 of these bad boys, and most of the comments that you made, I am going to concur with. I remember some of them. I don't remember others. Some of them are better than others, but for the most part, I think that these are enjoyable films to watch. So there are a couple of them like I could do without, but JCVD certainly deserves to be in the conversation of like greatest action, one of the greatest action heroes of all times after seeing these movies. So that said, why don't you start off without your recos?
All right. So my recos, my first one, and this is in no particular order.
Okay.
These are just random movies, but I'm going to go with 1990's Death Warrant, which is an American prison action thriller. It's got Jean-Claude Van Damme playing a detective of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police from Quebec.
Right.
Quebec. What's really funny about that is they always have some sort of story or explanation for why he has his accent.
Right.
So he has come from all reaches of the earth, always with the same, accent, but they've always got an explanation for it. And in this movie, he confronts the maniac that killed his partner on the force. He's got to basically go undercover and be put in jail. Christian Naylor, played by Patrick Kilpatrick, which is the Sandman.
The Sandman.
So he's in jail in Los Angeles. I thought this one was pretty fun.
It would have been my fourth one if we had spread these recos out to 4. Then Death Warrant was my fourth one. I liked it too, man. I liked the whole vibe of the undercover cop in the prison. I thought he did a good job of it.
What you'll find with a lot of Jean-Claude movies is I would kind of compare him to. I would compare Jason Statham to him in this regard too, where he's always kind of the same character, but it's all about like changing the scenery and the plot just slightly. So it's like, oh, which Jean-Claude Van Damme movie is that? Oh, it's the one where he's a Canadian Mountie put in a LA prison.
Right. My reco, and you said in no particular order. I'm going to say that this was probably my favorite out of all the ones that I watched outside of Bloodsport and Kickboxer. I liked Hard Target. Hard Target is like the plot is like basically a woman hires him because she's trying to find out what happened to her father, who's missing a father. And it turns out that like he was wrapped up into this like, cat and mouse game where these guys like take these vagrant homeless people and like let people pay to get them, hunt them down and shoot them. Hard Target is fantastic. It is John Woo's first U.S. directed movie. It is Jean-Claude Van Damme in glorious moosed up mullet stage of his hair career. It is fantastic, complete with slow-mo spin kicks where his mullet just sort of like fans around his head. It's amazing. You've got our favorite Wilford Brimley in this movie playing,
Excellent.
his uncle with an absolutely terrible Cajun accent.
Speaking French.
Dude, there's some Wilford Brinkley, excuse me. Some glorious scenes in here. The best scene is when, like, the female love interest, she's waiting for him to kiss her, and instead he like reaches out and grabs a snake from over her shoulder, and he slaps it, and then he punches it, and then he bites the rattle off of the tail. Oh God, that's just like one of many ridiculous scenes. Hard target. If you'd never seen it, Amazon Prime, $3.99 rent. I'll do it tonight.
And I would shout out Lance Henriksen on this movie too. He's
Yes.
best known as Bishop in Alien. He's in The Terminator.
Right.
He was on Millennium, which was like Chris Carter's other show he did after X-Files. Great work. So what's really funny, I'm going to say about this movie is, like, you had told me you had watched it already, and you're like, we're really pumping it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching this movie, and I'm going, this movie is terrible.
Right.
And I'm going, this movie is kind of boring.
Right.
And then it hits the last 30 minutes of the movie.
Right.
And I'm like, holy crap. Like, all hell breaks loose. You got classic John Woo style action. Like,
dude.
I just think of like dropping the grenade in the pants, and like, there's so much that goes down.
What about when he crashes the motorcycle into the SUV, and then he flips over the SUV, turns around, shoots it, and then it explodes? I'm like, oh.
Doesn't he ride the motorcycle while he's standing on it as well?
Yeah,
at that point?
Yeah, he's riding on it, crashes it into it, jumps off, flips over the SUV, turns around, shoots it, and it blows up. I mean, and he's perfected the denim on denim look in this movie as well. Awesome. Like, he jumps off like a boat, I think, and swims in denim on denim, and he comes out like dry. It's amazing.
Accent in this one is explained because is in New Orleans and people speak French Creole, so now his accent works. And
right, yeah. So yes, but Wilford Brinkley, his accent was so bad. Like, I was like, dude, you should be fired. So anyway,
all right. So my next pick is I feel like I need to intro each one of these as the one where Jean-Claude Van Damme blank. In this one, it's the one where Jean-Claude Van Damme plays his twin brother. So my next pick is Double Impact. Double Impact is awesome. It's a twin brothers movie. Parents of these two infant boys are murdered in the beginning of the movie. The maid leaves Alex at a Hong Kong orphanage, and Frank, the parents' bodyguard, raises Chad in France, again explaining his accent. Mm-hmm. And then they show that Chad and Frank have moved and opened a martial arts dojo in LA, explaining the martial arts. Our good friend Bolo Young, who played Chong Li, he returns in this movie as a bad guy.
Yes, he does.
And I would just say there's like this phenomenal scene where a guy uses the spurs on his boots to spin kick a guy's throat open.
Game, set, match, right? Number 2 reco for me, Universal Soldier. Universal Soldier, it's a story of 2 soldiers in Vietnam that have sort of differences and agreements on or differences in how they should be handling, the scenario.
We call these HR issues.
Yeah, the HR issues. And they end up killing each other. Well, they're brought back to life in a top secret military experiment trying to create superhuman warriors decades later. They've been on ice, since the late 60s or 70s when they were killed, and they were brought back in the 90s as these super soldiers. I like this movie because it's not your typical Van Damme, karate movie. It's more of him as action. There's a lot more shooting, although he does do some, fighting later on in the end. But the opening scene is great. It sort of establishes the tone on this one. You can see Dolph Lundgren, by the way, is the opposing Vietnam soldier, Universal Soldier. He's making a necklace out of ears and sewing it together, like in the opening scene. You know, he kills a bunch of Vietnamese kids and sort of sets this all off. You've got, you know, this whole action that's happened. I think this is a good one. It ends with body count in the credits. Body counts are playing. The end scene, Dolph Lundgren gets thrown into a wood chipper. They're cauterizing the rooms with cigarette lighters, you know, on and on. You got Debo from Friday in here. He's one of the other Universal soldiers. You know, it's
R.I.P. Debo.
It was, but does nothing to explain his French accent. He's an American soldier in Vietnam with a French accent. Does nothing to explain that. So there goes your theory of them trying to explain it in every movie. But this one, I don't know, whatever. So didn't matter.
I think as a cinephile, one thing I appreciated was just the type intro to the movie. They're like zipping up body bags with their names on them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they hit you with the title card. So it's just a great way to introduce / pronounce them dead. So my final pick here is more of a nostalgia pick than anything, but it's 1995 Street Fighter. A bunch of great actors in this one. Jean-Claude Van Damme obviously is like the most renowned of the bunch, probably. You got Ming-Na Wen, who plays Chun-Li. She also has played everybody under the sun. Agent Melinda May from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Fennec Shand in The Mandalorian most recently. She did the voice of Mulan in the original
I didn't make that connection, dude. She was
Fennec Shand.
Look at that.
She's a Disney darling. Right. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Mandalorian, Mulan, like all of those. And then you got Raul Julia, obviously, in one of his last roles, playing
Gomez.
M. Bison, and he was Gomez Adams in the Addams Family. Kylie Minogue, all-star singer, which actually reminds me of a off-mic conversation Ken and I were having about his favorite female pop stars.
Our next
we were comparing the power rankings of female pop singers from the 70s to the 90s. But Ryan, that's for another podcast.
You can't. You said for nostalgia, I guess you can't tell me that you actually like this movie, because this movie is awful.
You know, there's something to be said about awful movies that they're also awesome.
Right.
Now, am I going to put this on all the time? Is this a Pulp Fiction level movie? No, not at all. But like a once every few years, you're going to enjoy it. You're going to have some chuckles. Similar to the first Mortal Kombat movie, it's always cool to see this thing that you love in the flesh, actors. And again, if you think about the timing, in 1995, I was 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm 13 years old. So it was, it holds a special place in my heart. But did they do the characters well? Not that great. I find it interesting, though, that in the beginning of the movie, none of the characters look like themselves in the video game. Yeah. But by the end of the movie, they all look like the characters from the video game.
Okay. Why was Van Damme even casted as Colonel Guile in the first place? He's got a big American flag tattoo on his shoulder. Zero explanation for his French accent. He made a boat. Like, I think this was the movie that like put him in the stratosphere in terms of like paydays for action stars. I think he got a ton of money for this movie, which is why he signed up for it. Because I don't think anybody's ever going to read this plot and be like, yeah, this is a killer movie I want to be in. You know, does it make sense for this French-speaking man to be like the embodiment of the USA out of all of these soldiers? You know, that doesn't make zero sense to me with zero explanation. So
I think they were just looking for the martial arts credibility for a martial arts film.
He barely even fights in the movie, though.
Yeah, I just think it's the big name. This is at a time in the 90s. You have to remember that this wasn't a time where they would take franchises and they would make a movie that had nothing to do with the franchise, putting actors that had no business playing those characters just to try to get people to pop and show up and go and fill a movie theater.
Right.
People would go, and I bet you Street Fighter was all over your McDonald's cups. I bet you Street Fighter was all over your TV and everything. Like,
but Dolph Lundgren would have been a better casting of Guile, I think, because at least the dude has an accent that's you could, or no accent,
Probably just star power at the time, though.
Yes.
Jean-Claude Van Damme had admitted coming into this movie, he had a major cocaine habit at the time. So I've heard a lot about this through the grapevine throughout the years, and diving into, studying him for this podcast. I guess in the 90s, at one point, he was going through about 10 grams a day, $10,000 worth of cocaine a week. The director, Stephen E. D'Souza, had stated that Jean-Claude was coked out of his mind on the set. The studio had hired a wrangler to take care of him, but actually the wrangler was a bad influence. So I don't know if the wrangler saw this as an opportunity to party with JCVD or what, but Jean-Claude would call in sick. So the director kept having to look at like the script and figure out like, what else can we film? Because Jean-Claude's not going to show up. And then he wouldn't show up on Mondays at all. So just what a nightmare. You've got a star, but you can't really use him. And maybe that answers some of your questions about the fighting too. I mean, maybe there was just a lot less because he couldn't hold it together. It might have minimized his role.
Well, Guile's character in the video game was more like the boxer style anyways. She had like a straightforward stance, did a lot more punching. She wasn't like a martial artist. So maybe I'll use that as an excuse. I think it's just poor casting, but that's a different conversation versus like, his substance abuse, which, that seems to be a common story throughout any big mega star, that hits it sometime in their career, whether they're an actor or a musician or whatever. So,
well, it influences your decision making, right? Like he wasn't willing to put his name on a video game, but then he goes and he's a star in a video game movie later because he's got a coke habit and he needs.
I don't know
money.
If he wasn't willing or he just wasn't able to because he was already roped into Universal Soldier where he was starting to get money,
Sure.
So this was like the big money where it was like stupid money and, it's not a lot of work and I can be coked up out of my head because it's a video game. Who cares, Like he's never going to go down in history as like a great actor. He's going to go down in history as a great action martial artist, or however you define that. Is he an action hero or is he a martial arts hero or, I don't know. But he's never going to be, he's never going to be in like Rain Man, part 2, it's not like he has that chop, So yeah, I guess you can afford to be like a giant cokehead and do stupid movies at that point.
12-year-old, 13-year-old me thought this movie ruled. I probably only saw it once and then I never saw it again.
And 53-year-old you says what?
Well, what I'll say is that I pick up on things that I wouldn't have noticed as a kid. So, I mean, it was the 90s. It was great, corny 90s dialogue, cheesy stuff. But here's some fun things that I noticed. One, in M. Bison's like room, like whatever you want to call that, his headquarters, there's a John Wayne Gacy painting hanging up.
I noticed that sort of cartoony, pastel color painting. I didn't realize that that's what that was.
Yeah, it's a clown painting. So it's probably they're like, he's supposed to be the most evil guy in the world. And it was a very candy coated evil villain, right? Like he didn't seem that evil. And then the last thing that is really cool is that Roshan Seth plays Dalism in the movie, which he doesn't really play the video game accurate character with the stretchy arms and everything. But he was Chadar Lal in Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom. Yeah. So we go back to Temple of Doom again. But I just think it's a fun flick. Like if I'm judging, is this the best Jean-Claude Van Damme movie? Probably not. And honestly, Bloodsport and Kickboxer are the best Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, and that's why they're the topic of the podcast. But this one makes the list because mixing it up, it's fun. It's a fun flick, and it's got a lot of backstory that like makes it more interesting. You notice more all these years later.
I know the CGI wasn't there, but that they didn't even try to add any elements of the Street Fighter video game moves. You know what I mean? They just had like regular fighting. They didn't try to do any of the power stuff. Although they did, like, Bison does get sort of like, I don't know exactly what happens. He gets like electrocuted or something. So he kind of has a little bit of like electricity later on in the movie, but
Blanca is terrible.
Blanca's terrible. Yeah. I mean, they didn't do anything really to, I liked that in Mortal Kombat, the new one. It's like they get to the underworld, and now that's how they get their powers, is they have to go into this sort of new realm and unleash them, like unlock them. So I like that explanation. I would have appreciated them trying to do something like that for this, but they're like,
I wonder if with the success of Mortal Kombat, if we'll see a new Street Fighter with a bunch of people.
Maybe.
I know both of those franchises. There's been a lot of movies that come out that are direct to video and stuff like that, but anytime you have success, that brings a bunch of other movies that are similar that will come to the surface.
Mm-hmm. All the movies that I picked, like you said, were from 88 to 94, with the exception of this one, which is just titled JCVD. This one came out in 08. And this one is like, he plays himself. He's embattled like in a lawsuit. He's trying to get custody of his kids. He can't get any money. He's in his hometown in Brussels. And he goes into a bank to withdraw some funds, and he walks into like a heist, and it's a kidnapping situation, and it turns into this hostage thing where the police or FBI end up thinking that he's actually the kidnapper and the robber. He plays himself, but he kind of cracks. It's a self-deprecating, sort of introspective character where, you know, art imitates life and life imitates art. And I liked it. It was like an artsy film for Jean-Claude Van Damme. There's no fighting, very minimal, you know, I mean, there's a little bit of, you know, disarming the guy, taking his gun, that kind of thing, but very minimal fighting. So it's not a typical action movie for him. He talks about like himself as an actor being typecasted and doing these things. He gets in the car, like a limo, you know, taxi driver, and the taxi driver's giving him shit. He's like, look, I'm tired. I just want to sleep. She's like, look, you're the biggest star to ever come out of this town. You represent us. I'm a taxi driver. I get to talk to you. You're going to listen to me. Just sit there and listen to me talk to you. And I thought, wow, this is a really funny script. You know, this is what would happen if he went back to Brussels and like the local taxi driver was driving him to the bank. The movie looks like it was originally shot in French and it was dubbed over in English later on, which I liked. I like that he faces the camera at one point and talks about his cocaine addiction, which you just addressed during the Street Fighter years. I like that he's trying to get a movie with his agent. He's trying to get money forwarded, and his agent like, I'm sorry, you lost it out to Steven Seagal because Seagal promised to cut off his ponytail. There's always been this sort of like underlying, you know, competition between Seagal and Van Damme. I thought it was very funny. So I appreciated this movie, and I suspected this movie was going to be like this. I didn't watch it ever before until this marathon for the podcast, and I was right. It was a winner. My third reco for sure.
All right, dude. Let's talk legacy. Let's talk Jean-Claude Van Damme. Let's talk about how great he is.
All right.
My question, first of all, to you is, what are the signature characteristics of Jean-Claude Van Damme?
All right. I think we've talked about two. There's three. First is he's got signature moves. The split that he does it in every move. He did it like in a Volvo commercial recently to like Sail Away or whatever song it was, or Orinoco Flow, or forget what it was. But, you know, his split is his signature move, as well as his kicks, his roundhouse, his standing front kick where he can like reach above your head. Those are signature moves. Like they're, Bruce Lee had so many moves, except maybe his one finger punch. Maybe that's his, or one-handed punch is his signature. I don't know. There aren't many action figures who have a signature move, and he's got two between the splits and his kicks. His high-waisted pants, his ridiculous outfits, his denim on denim are signature Jean-Claude, characteristics. I think it needs to be a part of his legacy, everlasting legacy. In addition to his ever-changing haircut, the guy was pretty good at, like, one day he'd have like a sort of a nice like coif. Another time he'd have the mullet. Another time he'd be it'd be cropped close. Or then he'd have in Double Impact he had like two different hairstyles, even though with the same hair. Like, he did a great job of changing his hair in every movie. But we've not talked about it yet. But undeniably, we see his ass in every single movie. Is that not a Jean-Claude Van Damme signature asset? No pun intended.
Yeah, that's definitely a not common. I think I mentioned to you the other day. I think I mentioned to you the other day that you see his ass more than you see anyone else naked in his movies. And it's always like the weird moment where they just happen to be walking into the room when he's getting out of the shower or just getting dressed or whatever, and he kind of looks over his shoulder. Like,
it's not always a love scene, right? It's like,
yeah, you could literally say it's unneeded. but what they're doing is, what I put down as one of his main signature things is his jacked physique. Dude, like, he's got a physique like no one else.
Right.
And he's not an oversized man. If anything, he is the ideal height of a man, 5'9", which, is how tall I am. Coincidentally, I don't know. And similar to me, he looks pretty average with the shirt on, but you take the shirt off and then, it unleashes the beast.
Right.
But he looks, very unassuming when he's like fully clothed in his denim on denim.
Right.
But as soon as you remove the clothing, you see like how ripped he is.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, I'm going to take it a step further. I'm not going to just take off the shirt for the movie. I'm going to take the pants off too. We're going to sell a few more tickets to all sorts of people that might be interested in what I've got to offer.
He's always adjusting his tighty whities, and he's always gloriously tanned. Like full body tan. There's no tan lines between back and ass. It is all one color. I don't know about you, but my back and my ass are not the same color. Look, he's a good looking dude, man. And I think that's probably a deliberate move, to, play up the, the sex appeal for women, get him in there and, drive audience. But,
it's the typical you've got it, flaunt it kind of a thing. Like he can look back now on his career and people will always remember him as being ridiculously handsome in all areas,
Brad Pitt takes his shirt off in every movie too. Stallone was in movies where, he's the only guy. Would you fight in a jungle with no shirt on? Probably not, man. Like, you probably would die of malaria that you got bitten by a mosquito before you got shot by the enemy, Put some bug spray in a long sleeve shirt on, buddy, and you're probably going to survive longer. You know what I mean? But it's better when these guys take their shirts off because it sells more. So, but Van Damme, another legacy moment of his though is like they show you the things that he can do. They show you every time, like in every training montage, they love to tie his legs apart by rope and stretch him until he's got a full split, So look, if you've got a gimmick, man, sell it as many times as you can, right? So we can joke and laugh about it, but look, if I could do the splits, I'd probably do the split when I was ordering Taco Bell. You know what I mean? I'd go in there and be like, look what I could do. Why have all these moves unless you're going to do them in the mall? He's
very aware of his brand, right? Like, and a lot of actors fall into a hole of like, well, this is my brand, and I know this is what people know me for, and this is what people want to see me as. But I see myself more as like a Shakespearean actor, or I see myself more as like this, or in this movie, I don't want to use martial arts. I'm gonna just use my brain. Like, no, he knew what people wanted to see, and that's why every movie is the same character, different plot, different setting. Like, he's such an easy character to. I should be careful with my words, but I was going to say get behind. But
zing, 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 zing.
He's a likable good guy in every movie. There's only a few roles he's had where he's been a bad guy. Expendables 2 is one where he's a bad guy.
Right.
But he also, I think, identified that as his brand, as like, I'm going to be this likable. He's got like that boyish charm about him. And part of that comes through with the bad acting. Like, the way he says things is like, oh, I can't drive a car. Like in a Hard Target. Like, it's just innocent.
But how is it then that Schwarzenegger was able to like leap into different things if you consider they're coming kind of from the same place? They just have physiques, they have physical capabilities, and they have accents to overcome. But yet Arnold had a much greater, like way more vastly, different career in terms of roles. He did comedy, Kindergarten Cop and Jingle All the Way and Twins and things like that. He was able to branch out into different things. JCVD was not. Why is there? I mean, is it intelligence? I don't think JCVD is a dumb dude. I mean, Arnold goes on and becomes the governor. So what's the difference between those two guys? Why couldn't Jean-Claude get past this sort of typecast that he was in?
Well, first, let me just say, I was just thinking in my head, like, oh, why didn't Jean-Claude like ever change his accent? But then I start thinking about his peers. I think about Stallone. Stallone always had the same accent.
Right.
He didn't change his accent. Schwarzenegger clearly didn't change his accent.
Right.
Jackie Chan didn't change his accent.
Right.
Like, these guys all just stuck to who they were, and that's what they were known for, and that's who they played. To answer how does Schwarzenegger end up in those roles, one thing I think about Schwarzenegger is he's able to animate his face. So he can act with his face, whereas like Jean-Claude, he doesn't act with his face. His face is just kind of the same. But there's a comedic element to Arnold's way that he does things. And then on top of it, he's a monster.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think the meme you sent me before the podcast, where like he's screaming, but they put the mic on there, and then Chong Li's banging on the drums. Clearly, he can animate his face. He's got some ridiculous faces in Bloodsport that he makes. Yeah, I think he probably wasn't granted the opportunity to do that where Arnold was, is because Arnold's sheer size is comical. Yes. You know what I mean? Just his mass, where you just said it, Van Damme looks like a normal dude when he has a shirt on, especially a big baggy 80s shirt on, big denim on denim. You don't know that he's got the chiseled muscles from Brussels underneath it, So that physical comedy isn't obvious, but when you're a giant man, it's obvious.
This is why The Rock is also successful as a comedy.
Exactly.
Like, he's funny, but like let's pretend that The Rock was 5'9". It wouldn't be as funny.
Right.
But when you take a giant The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and you pair him up with Kevin Hart, it's hilarious. Just like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito.
Totally.
It's hilarious because there's a big difference of he's not living in a rock-sized world. He's living in a 5'9" world. And that makes it funny.
So how does this, like, where do you put this, like, in his legacy then? Like, what is his legacy? Is he just a great martial arts star? Is he an action hero? Is he a movie star? What do you categorize him at? How do you define those things? Can you even define those things? I don't even know if you can define those things, but because clearly he's limited. Like let's just is he a movie star to a certain degree, right? He's not like
he's a movie star because he was successful.
He's not the
right?
everything movie star, right?
But
he's
like,
a
can you
type of movie
compare
star.
if I said, hey Ken, tell me your top 10 favorite, or not? I shouldn't even say favorite. Who are the greatest 100 Hollywood actors of all time, male actors? You're probably not going to say Jean-Claude Van Damme. You're probably going to have 100 people that you would qualify as a better actor. Action star, yes.
But if you put, I would put him in the top 5 of action stars. I think,
yeah, definitely top 10. I don't know. I don't know. Like, how does he stack up to the other action stars? Maybe we should set like, who are those stars first?
Well, all right. Let's try to define action star though. Is it just?
I'm thinking more pure action star, not actors who have been in action films.
Right.
So like I would say like Bruce Willis, he's been in action movies, but I don't really call him an action star.
You wouldn't call Bruce Willis an action star?
He can be, but I think because his overall career has been other things.
I think if you put him in the Expendables, then he's an action hero. So he was. I think you got to put some parameter on it. And if Hollywood made that cast with those guys, they considered him an action hero.
Yeah, but he's riding on one movie. He's riding on one movie.
Wow.
Well,
no, I mean, he's done
a series of movies, right? But now is Bruce Willis more? Is he more believable than Liam Neeson? Yeah. I feel like Liam Neeson, they took an average actor and they put him in an action movie.
Action star. He's a believable, non-muscly superhero action star. He's definitely an action star though, because when I think of Bruce Willis, I think of Die Hard and I think of Moonlighting. And that's it. Like I'm right now. I'm like, what else has Bruce Willis been in? He's been in a million things, right?
But would he crack the top 10? I don't think so.
All right. Well, let's roll out some names.
If anything, his acting kicks him out.
Well, obviously, then if you're gonna say who are the biggest action stars of all time, or of top 10 or top whatever, Schwarzenegger number 1 probably, Stallone number 2, or at least they're in there. And then where do you go? Because there's a million different qualifying things.
Well, there's guys that I think are kind of on a similar level. You got Chuck Norris. You got Steven Seagal. You got Jean-Claude Van Damme.
JCVD, top 5.
Modern that would be in there too is Jason Statham. Honestly,
because they've never done any other type of movie, or because the majority of their movies are action. Arnold clearly has done other things. Stallone clearly has done other things, but the majority of their things are fighting, killing things, right?
Yeah, and you kind of got to look at like who influences who, like what's what. Like, how many movies came out of Rambo? How many movies came out of Terminator? How many movies came out of that kind of stuff?
Where would you put Tom Cruise in this conversation? Is he an action
I think
star?
Tom Cruise is in the same realm as Harrison Ford, as Bruce Willis, as Chris Pratt. Like these are actions. These are actors that have been action stars, but I don't think that their legacy is as an action star.
Yeah, your buddy Handy says Keanu here. I wouldn't put him as an action star. John Wick's great, but to me, he's still, Bill and Ted.
This is Keanu, though, is John Wick is his Die Hard.
Yeah, but only in like the last 5 years. So he did most of his career. Well, and I guess
you could say the same thing about Bruce Willis, though.
Matrix. I don't know. All right. Well, what about Matt Damon? Jason, that's Jason Bourne, man.
Same. I think that they're in the same category. I think there's tiers to this, right?
Right.
I think there's tiers. I think that, again, I almost like put that the stars that were better actors are almost like it discredits their making this list for me. But that's just me. Like, I don't know.
So actually, out of this whole conversation, every star that we've mentioned so far in this category, JCVD is the only one who knows martial arts, and Statham arguably, right? So you're not going to include Bruce Lee in this. You're not going to include Jackie Chan. You're not going to include Jet Li, because why? Or are they?
They're definitely in this list. Yeah, yeah. I think that. I mean,
yeah, this is
Bruce
hard.
Lee could be the top, man.
I know.
The only difference is that his impact in the American market is smaller. Like in the history of American film, but internationally, he's probably the top tip of the top. Like,
I mean, you put guys like The Rock in there too. You put Vin Diesel in there, and you put.
I think like The Rock and I don't know, Vin Diesel. That's not it.
About Harrison Ford, dude. You know.
I say though, like I think Statham and The Rock are the next generation. So we don't know where their careers are going to end, but I would assume that they're going to end up there. The Rock kind of feels like the new Schwarzenegger in Hollywood right now. Mm-hmm. He's getting those same type of roles, the half comedy, half action. But I mean, Chuck Norris, he's got legit martial arts, right?
It's tough. There are so many, like you really have to qualify it, because like what is like action hero versus movie star?
Yeah.
Or action hero versus good actor. You know, I don't know. I mean, like Chuck Norris basically only played in movies where he was fighting.
And I mean, well, you could go to like what type of genre of movies is action? So is Daniel Craig an action star because he's James Bond?
Sure. Yes.
Like,
Daniel Craig is.
I would say if of any James Bond, he's the greatest action star. Like doing like Tom Cruise stunts, you know, like the extreme stunts, the extreme fighting, much more brutal.
I would actually arguably say Tom Cruise is probably the biggest movie star on this list.
Yeah.
With an emphasis more on action. He's done a ton of things, but I think people will remember him more for like his action stuff than they will for his other stuff.
Maybe though too, it's maybe that he does action, but he's not really like a fighter.
Tom Cruise.
Yeah, like he's doing more like stunty stuff, like where he's like doing extreme things, but it's not all about like, look at Jean-Claude Van Damme. It's all about like ass kicking and shooting guns and.
All right, well, let's try to do the impossible here. Let's try to do the big four of action heroes. Maybe you got to do five. Schwarzenegger and Stallone being two of them.
Yeah, for sure. My tie for number one is those two, but we'll get to who's the number one later. Okay.
Right. We don't have to rank them. We should just throw out 4 or 5 names.
I'm going to go Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Right.
It just gets to be a mixed bag.
Chuck Norris.
Yeah, probably Chuck Norris.
Where do you put Mel Gibson in this? Lethal Weapon, Braveheart. Oh my God, this could go on and on and on, man. Mad Max. You can't include. You can't not put Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
Dude, right? It's really hard.
It is. I mean, I think for sure. I think there's no argument that Stallone and Schwarzenegger are the top of the top.
Right.
I don't know why I can say that, but I just know that. I'm going to
put JCVD third because he's clearly, when it comes to action, that's all he does is action. So when we define action as you have to be fighting in the movie, Jean-Claude Van Damme is number 3.
I think too that the Schwarzenegger Stallone thing is that they're in the same camp as JCVD, where it's like believable, but they can also act.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are they acting on a Tom Cruise level? Are they acting on a Harrison Ford level? Probably not. Right. But somehow the balance of the scales. Also, for people who haven't lived through this, man, talk about the peak of those guys' careers. They're untouchable. Planet Hollywood, man. Like
totally. You know, that's when we talk about this, and I'm like, Chuck Norris, we're throwing in there. Chuck Norris, I mean, that dude peaked 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you know? So, but you can't, I mean, if you're going to do that, you put John Wayne in this conversation, you know? Where's Charles Bronson, you know?
Bronson, yes. Wayne, no.
Seagal, he did like 4 flicks. He's out, I think. You know, he's too one-dimensional, and I think he's.
Oh yeah, and Seagal's like real life Frank Dukes. I hear he's like kind of phony.
But he would come up in this conversation in many people our age, in our demographic.
The
Seagal
movies are good.
He would be included in this conversation. Yeah, Seagal movies are great. You know, so.
You know what though? You know, in support of Mike Handy saying Keanu Reeves. Point Break, pretty awesome.
I'm an FBI agent. No, dude, you're a bad actor. That's what you
his program.
Keanu can't. He's still.
You know what? The Matrix actually explained his accent. So
John Wick is great because he doesn't talk; he just fights the whole time. I mean, great. You know, proving that you can be taught how to do, you know, some moves for the big screen.
So Mike Handy also said Sigourney Weaver. We're not ignoring female stars. We're just really only talking about men of action movies right now.
Sigourney's awesome though. Sigourney's definitely in my top favorite actresses of all times, dude. Aliens, Ghostbusters, done right there. Game over.
So good. I can't wait to do an Aliens podcast.
In a Ghostbusters podcast.
Expendables did a great job though of getting the gang together, getting everybody possible, even like tertiary action people like Randy Couture. He's a fighter, he's not an action star, but like, and Steve Austin, Stone Cold Steve Austin was in the Expendables. Yeah. They're like, let's just take pop culture's most badass and put them in one movie together. And that's that's a big criteria for the action star thing. I think is badass too.
Right.
Harrison Ford. True. Really cooler than cool. Is he a badass? Not really a badass. Right. Cooler than cool though.
Yeah, but you wouldn't call Matt Damon badass, but you would call him badass as Jason Bourne though, right?
Yeah, isn't it weird that like Matt Damon and Jason Bourne are two different people?
Right, I know.
Jeremy Renner,
Jason Bourne gives you hope that you could like go and train Krav Maga for a week and be a badass, you know. But back to the Expendables, we've touched on this on other podcasts. People want to see these ultimate mashups. They want Alien versus Predator. They want Freddy versus Jason. They want Stallone versus Schwarzenegger versus Willis versus Statham. They want everybody in there. You know, it wasn't, I think, until Heat where you had like Pacino and De Niro in the same movie together. Yep. When you get the cream of the crop and you put them together, man, sometimes you get movie magic. Other times you don't. But, you know, the Expendables, I think, did a good job of trying to define what we're talking about here because they said we got to pick some people. Now there's some bullshit in there. We talked about this before the show. Liam Hemsworth and Randy Couture, you know, probably didn't deserve to be in those movies, but, you know, I think it's a good way.
The greatest thing that the Expendables did, though, for children of the 80s is they gave them a movie that had a plot that was straight out of the 80s.
Right, totally.
And it's because they're written by Stallone, and Stallone wrote a lot of great content in the 80s for us. Like, just ridiculous plots. And, I mean, even if you... I would love to do a podcast on First Blood alone, just First Blood, not Rambo. First Blood, though, is very different than Rambo.
Sure.
Like, they really took that thing and ran with it. And you even see, like, Stallone doubles in size.
Right. Yeah.
Between First Blood and Rambo. Like, it's all good, but there's a big difference between what he was going for and what he achieved accidentally.
I want to bring up something that I noticed. Unless you want to answer this first, let's talk about this first real quick.
Okay, we got a listener question here. We got James Bond versus Jason Bourne. I mean, I'm gonna go Bond all day. I don't think there is a Bourne without Bond. If we're talking the actual physical characters,
I
Bond's
mean, I don't know
cooler.
how to answer this. I love Jason Bourne's fighting style, but yeah, in terms of coolness, man, Bond is cool. Like you got to put cool is cool, man. You know. So I noticed something watching all these movies. Not just his propensity to be naked all the time, but did you notice the giant lump on his forehead that has been throughout his entire career?
I did not. Like, are you talking like a? So, are you talking about like he uses a prosthetic in every movie, or because
No,
I've noticed like black eyes and like lumps on his head after he fights.
that lump on his head is not after he fights. It's not a prosthetic from one movie. That lump on his head is in every single one of his movies. So
What?
if you can go back and dig through a photo, maybe you could see it, or if you've got some time to go back and look, he has a lump like above his left eye that I noticed very early on, and I thought, okay, that's just something from this movie. And then I noticed it in the next movie, and then I noticed it in the next movie, and then I noticed it in the next movie. So I dug a little deep into this research here.
It was listed in the cast.
And there's a couple things that I found about it. The first thing that I read about it was that it was a bump on his forehead that he got in the early 80s because he was sparring at Chuck Norris's house and got hit. And
that's what happens when you spar with Chuck Norris.
Right. You know, Chuck Norris, when Chuck Norris does push-ups, he doesn't push his body down, he pushes the earth down. Have you ever see those like with Chuck Norris?
Yep.
Those like, I love those Chuck Norris memes. And this was supposed to be confirmed on a David Letterman interview, but there's no proof of that. Then I read a rumor that it's called an osteoma, which is a benign tumor of bone growth, which is just aesthetically, unappealing. Otherwise, there's no harm to it. That makes more sense to me. I don't know why a man of that caliber of financial, reward would not fix it. Maybe it just was too big that he decided he didn't want to mess with it. Maybe it would leave a scar or, different color skin or something. I don't know. But then I found an article from Playboy magazine, January 1995, and quote unquote, a reporter notices bump on his forehead and asks if it was an accident. No, Van Damme says it's a cyst. My wife says now that I'm a big movie star, I should cut it out. What do you think? Should I? If it's a cyst, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why wouldn't you just drain it and move on? Sort of the benign tumor makes more sense to me. That was like bone growth. But I'm surprised that you didn't see this because it was staring at me like a third eye from the first movie that I watched, which was Cyborg, by the way, which is definitely not going to make any of my cuts on the list. Probably the worst Jean-Claude Van Damme movie if we're going to talk about any of those. But throughout all of them, including the newest ones.
I did not notice. I'm going to have to Google that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can come up with a million reasons why he probably didn't get rid of it. In the most basic is that there's a fear of having surgery like that. And what if it came out worse than going in? Or, as a fighter, I know that scar tissue easily opens up. Like if you're gonna get hit in the face at all, I would assume it's like bone growth or something though.
Yeah.
And,
Crystal says that Jean-Claude doesn't ascribe to my beauty standards. I guess I'm just so vain. I do want to have his gloriously tanned ass, though. I really do. I don't know. I guess I was just staring at him so much in awe of his beauty that I noticed this bump on his forehead. And I was like, dude, you should do something about that. You're making millions. JCVD, if you hear this, brother, all love, man.
Clearly did not hurt his career at all.
No, yeah.
So I don't know if we want to talk about the worst movies ever, but since you brought up Cyborg, I did want to just drop some knowledge on that. I went into that thinking it was going to be awesome.
Yeah, me too.
Now, I actually shouldn't have because That movie was an unused script for Masters of the Universe 2. So if you know anything about the Dolph Lundgren Masters of the Universe live action movie, I want to do a podcast on it just because it's so terrible. It's one of those movies, again, where they take source material and they just run wild with it and they change everything. And the characters don't look anything like they do in the cartoon. Like Skeletor is terrifying. He looks nothing like Skeletor, and not like terrifying in a cool way. Frank Langella plays Skeletor. Dolph Lundgren plays He-Man. Man-at-Arms looks pretty tight, but there's no Orko. Instead, they add a whole new character that can time travel, and it's questionable movie. But so they were going to make a second movie. They write a script. Meanwhile, the same studio is going to do a live action Spider-Man movie. So they build a huge set for the Spider-Man movie. They got a script for Spider-Man. They got a script for Masters of the Universe. Both the movies get canceled. So to save money, they decide they're going to repurpose the Spider-Man set and use the script from Masters of the Universe and make a totally new movie. So imagine that instead of him being the character he was, that was actually He-Man.
I can't imagine that, like, what Spider-Man movie you could use with the set of Cyborg.
I mean, if anything, the set was pretty cool. Like, if there's any saving grace with the movie.
Yeah, but there was like an old like pirate ship in the background and like a wasteland city. Like, what Spider-Man movie are you making in that setting? But whatever. That movie was terrible.
Maybe they were time traveling. I don't know, but not a good movie.
Pretty bad in that.
Not a good movie.
Yeah.
Any other last thoughts on Jean-Claude before we get to our final segment?
You know, I think we covered it, man. I'm going to put him up in the top 3 below Stallone and Schwarzenegger in terms of action heroes, because, you know, he was one of the first kind of like martial artists to cross over, and eventually got into movies where he wasn't even using his fighting skills. He was just, you know, like Universal Soldier being one of them, like, you know, and so on and so forth. So I think he deserves a legacy. I think he's movie candy. You know what I mean? Like, it's fun to watch a movie of his, you know, regardless. So there's lots of reasons why you want to watch it and look at it. So I think he deserves it. One minor fun fact that I thought was just going to throw this random thing out there that we had not talked about that came up in my research was that JCVD was playing Predator originally. He was the guy in the costume to play Predator because they wanted Predator to be more mobile and have fighting abilities. But they eventually, I'm not sure the reason why he was removed and replaced, but they eventually chose somebody who was way taller and bigger and more statuesque and more imposing physically, as opposed to more nimble and fight worthy. So I think that's a really funny, weird fact. I can't imagine Jean-Claude Van Damme in a Predator costume doing like spinning kicks, you know, against Schwarzenegger or splits for that matter. But I think initially that the intent was they wanted him for his sort of choreography, his ability to do that kind of physicality. But it didn't work out. Clearly his career still was fine though. So
yeah, I would say what a gift. You know, this has been a very enjoyable podcast to go through, and the preparation for it, if anything, you know, you would hope when you do something like this and you watch a bunch of movies that you would like the actor even more.
Yeah.
And I definitely am walking away with a better knowledge of how awesome this guy was.
Me too.
I would say, just for the listeners, if you want to dive into some of these movies, I would say the grouping of movies that I tried to watch was everything from Black Eagle to, I think, Sudden Death, which is it's the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie where they're in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup. It's basically the hockey version of Die Hard.
Right.
But you know, check out that range of movies and dive in and have fun. You know, life is too serious and as it is, you know, so watch these movies and you know, when you get fed up with your coworkers, you know, just spinning head kick or do the splits and punch him in the nuts. You know, it's.
I agree on all those sentiments, dude. It was a lot of fun the last week to watch all these and just kind of lose yourself for a little bit, man. So, fun podcast.
It's time for our final segment of the podcast. One's Gotta Go. In this segment, I will be providing our guests with 10 sets of 3 bands. Within each set, our guest gets to keep 2 of the 3 bands, but one's gotta go.
I like this a lot.
This is the debut of the new segment. So, hope you're ready, Ken.
Yep, and probably doesn't need to be discussed that you and I have not talked about this previously, so I don't know what's coming at me.
No, you don't know what's coming at you. I'm just going to read the list 1 through 10. So we'll take it in stride. And
all right.
You feel you want to discuss any of these, feel free. But if you feel like moving on, just let me know. All right. Number 1. We'll start with the softball here.
All right.
Judas Priest, Metallica, Iron Maiden.
Oh geez. Priest.
All right, so you're keeping Metallica and Iron Maiden.
And
right,
only because do you want me to explain or no?
Yeah, go ahead.
Only because I was introduced to Priest like much later in life. I was Metallica and Maiden in my teens or before, and I didn't get into Priest until my 30s. And that's my fault, but that's just the way that it rolled.
I hope you've been rigorously listening and training and preparing for our Judas Priest podcast.
Sure. I think I'm going to have a step in. The agent, if you're listening, you can do the Priest one.
All right, number 2. Rat, Twisted Sister.
Oh, you dick.
Motley Crue.
Ooh. You're deliberately pulling on the heartstrings because Twisted Sister and Rat are like my first 2.
First love.
That's 2 of 3. If you did Quiet Riot in there, I'd punch you through the computer.
I almost did.
I'm going to eliminate Rat though.
Oh,
yes, because
Stephen Pearcy is rolling over in his grave.
Because Motley Crue does have a little bit of a bite, and I think that that's a hard one to really to tell you why, but that's just my answer, and I'm going to sit with it. And
for the record, Stephen Pearcy is still alive. Stephen, if you're out there, love you, have you on the podcast. Big fan, big fan, long time listener.
If you come on.
Actually, did you hear the new Stephen Pearcy? I say new, but it was like from 5-10 years ago, solo track. It rips. It sounds like Velvet Revolver or something.
I don't think I've ever heard any Stephen
It's
Pearcy.
good. It was a recent Blabbermouth Metal Injection news story about the new unearthed solo tracks. Okay, number 3, Danzig, White Zombie, Typo Negative.
Typo. Yeah, you answer this question.
That hurts.
You kick out Danzig.
I'm the host, okay?
You're not kicking out.
What to do.
You're not kicking out Danzig, dude. No way. Danzig's kicking everybody else out. I'll tell you that.
Number 4. The Cure.
Huh.
The Smiths. Depeche Mode.
The Smiths.
What?
The Smiths.
Number 5. The Misfits. Sex Pistols. Ramones.
Sex Pistols.
Number 6. We got the W's here. We've got Winger. We've got Warrant. We got Whitesnake.
I'm gonna kick out Winger.
It's a very Beavis and Butthead of you.
Yeah.
Number 7, Limp Bizkit, Korn, System of a Down.
Limp Bizkit.
All right, number 8, Duran Duran, Tears for Fears, Eurythmics.
Ooh, I love me some Annie Lennox, dude.
Heck yeah.
And I do love me some George Michael. Who was the first one?
Duran Duran, Tears for Fears, Eurythmics. George Michael isn't.
Tears for Fears.
George Michael isn't in any of those bands. But
I was thinking Wham. Tears for Fears. You're out.
All right. Peace. Number 9 is our Ozfest exclusive question.
Okay.
The first one is Slayer. Ozzy. Black Sabbath.
Oh, come on. Come on. You can't. That's the universe just exploded on itself. It folded up. You can't even put that question in there. I'm going to take Ozzy solo out.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
That's how much Slayer means to me.
Number 10, our last and final question. Pantera. Sepultura. Rammstein.
Oh. Oh, come on.
Number 10, Pantera, Sepultura, Rammstein.
Jesus Christ. There's no right answer in this one, dude. This is like, who would you kill, you know? I guess I'll take Rammstein out.
All right. Germans are raging.
Oh, yeah. Dude, that's like, let me find the most ridiculous questions that Ken can never answer. I mean,
you asked for this.
Some of those were easy because I'm like, well, I don't listen to the Smiths, so you know. But really, Rammstein or Pantera and Sepultura? What would your answer be on that one? Sepultura? Right, you can't. I'd rather just choke on my own vomit than answer that.
I'm just the host.
Yeah. All right. I thought I was gonna like that category. I don't.
Yeah, well, I didn't even think about that until I started writing it up, and I'm like, oh, this is how we play this.
Right.
Like
how I torture Hoffman.
And I'm trying to like predict in my mind what is going to be most difficult for you. So some of them may have been like easier than others just because I wasn't guessing at how to make the worst possible combination.
Right.
So, all right. Well, that was our last segment. Everyone check out Ken's art. Ken, thanks for being a part of the podcast. You can check out Ken's art at Sculpable on Instagram. So that's Sculpable, SKULLPABLE.
Thank you, sir.
Also, make sure you check out collectanddestroy.com, which is collectxdestroy.com for the official website. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, shop.collectanddestroy.com. Again, shop.collectxdestroy.com for the official web store. Tons of toys, collectibles, shirts, pins. If you go there right now, you can enter podcast 15. Again, that's code podcast 15, and you'll save 15% instantly off all orders. Remember, this episode was streamed on YouTube live, and it will be there from now until forever. So you can go back, you check out all the visuals. Unfortunately, we don't have any visuals of the lump on JCVD's head, but you can see a bunch of other cool stuff. You can see Ken and my smiling faces. And then on the following Monday, every podcast will arrive on all audio streaming platforms from Spotify to Apple Podcasts app, Overcast, Anchor, Pocket Casts, and more. Ken, thank you so much for being a part of this double feature episode on Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Peace. That was
Everyone
badass.
stay safe out there. We'll catch you on our next episode when we sit down with our good friend Nate Failhour to talk all things The Goonies.
Ooh,
thank you.
Good one.
And good night.
Later, dude.